test.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first annual Texas Youth Summit in the Rio Grande Valley. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here in this monumental event. As we pray for our valley, our state, our country, this is a crucial moment. And this is something that's been in the works for a while. And as there is a spiritual shift, there's also going to be a political shift. So I want to introduce some city dignitaries that we have in our presence today. And if I don't mention your name, please stand up. But I want to welcome your own City Commissioner, J.P. Rodriguez. Mr. Robert Lopez, your Assistant City Police Chief. Dr. John Guerra, he's running for State Representative. Mr. Omar Quintanilla, City Commissioner from McAllen. Mr. Ruben Plata, great friend for over 30 years, the great City of Mission City Commissioner. And his wife, Terry. If there's any other city dignitaries I did not mention, I apologize, but if you would please stand so we can recognize you. I know we have Pastor Art Beckwith and Sister Nan from the prayer rooms here in Weslaco. But I want to personally thank Christian Collins, who started this movement, I believe, 3 years ago. And when he approached me about 4 or 5 months ago, it was just ideas that he had. And I also want to, first of all, I want to thank Pastor Mario and Ruth Perez for hosting this event from Mid-Valley Assembly Church. They've been so gracious, and I thank them, and the respect I have for them is immense. But Christian Collins, he hails from Houston. He ran for Congress earlier this year, and we connected, and he shared his vision for the Valley. And this has been a groundbreaking year, and we're believing next year will be double or triple. And with the list of speakers that we have, it's very impressive. And they represent the Valley. They'll represent the Valley in Washington, D.C. And we are in crucial times. The church is in crucial times. The city, the state, the nation is in crucial times. But with that being said, I want to show a quick video on Christian Collins, a little bit about himself. But before that, after that, Pastor Mario will be leading the national anthem, and then J.P. Rodriguez will be reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas flag. But I also want to say a little something. Robert, the Assistant Police Chief, he's a miracle. Several years ago, he was shot in the face, responding to an armed robbery. And here he is alive, 9 years later, 13 years later, serving this great community. And now he's risen up the ranks. So just wanted to say thank you. Okay, well, Pastor Mario, will you open up with the national anthem? And then after that, we'll show a video of Christian Collins after the Texas pledge is recited.
Will you please stand? And I know you know this beautiful ancient song, and I want you to sing it with us, okay? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam? broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Yeah. There's a song that we sing here at church that would be so apropos for us to sing the name of Jesus over our country. What do you think? Goes something like this. Shout Jesus on the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over
Every enemy, Jesus for my family, I speak the holy name, Jesus.
One more time. Shout Jesus from the mountains.
Shout Jesus from the mountains, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy, Jesus for my family, I speak the holy name, Jesus.
This time you'll say country when we get to the part Jesus in the family. Jesus
From the mountain, Jesus in the streets, Jesus in the darkness over every enemy, Jesus for my country, I speak the holy name, Jesus.
His name is power. Say
Your name is power, your name is healing.
heal our country, Lord.
Your name is life.
Break every stronghold.
Break every stronghold. Shine through the shadows. Burn like a fire.
I just want to speak the name of Jesus
I just want to speak the name of Jesus
over fear and all anxiety.
over fear and all anxiety.
Every soul held captive.
To every soul held captive by depression,
Come on, speak the name of
I
Jesus.
speak Jesus. Your name is power. Your name is healing. Your name is life. Break every stronghold. Shine through the shadows. Burn light.
One last time. Shout Jesus from the mountains. And then say country.
Shout Jesus from the mountain, Jesus in the street,
Everywhere we go.
Jesus in the darkness over every enemy. Oh, Jesus for my country, I speak the holy name, Jesus. Shout Jesus. Because your name is power. We thank you, Lord, because there's still hope for America. In Jesus' name, amen.
As you remain standing, I believe someone's going to lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you.
We're going to be showing an intro on Christian Collins, a young man who the vision was birthed in his heart to start the Texas Youth Summit. I know this past year, and last year, they had it in the Woodlands in Houston, and his event has grown in the last 3 years. So I'm proud to say to be part of this, and the future looks bright for the Rio Grande Valley. If you guys can, as soon as the video is over, Christian will be speaking.
It's so important to know why you believe what you believe. Not just the right answers, but why you believe what you believe.
Because you can come from a Christian conservative home, and yet you go off to college, and these colleges are liberal indoctrination camps. It's like the house built on sand. They fall apart.
I am so optimistic about what I'm seeing today, and I'm optimistic about our country at large. America is the greatest country in the world and the most exceptional nation, and we live in the greatest state in the union here in Texas, right? Well, God bless Texas, amen? Thank you all so much for being here, and with this amazing church, thank you, Mid-Valley Assembly and Pastor Mario and Ruth, everybody here for serving so faithfully so many years to this community, and thank you all, everyone else, for being a part of this incredible event. I've been very blessed in my life to see, just walking by faith, that you take little steps of obedience and big things can happen for minds of our youth. But we know as Texas Youth Summit that we have to educate them with conservative Judeo-Christian values to fight for this country and to do everything that they possibly can to save it. Amen? So I'm going to speak to the parents just for a second. Some of you may need to pull your kids out of the public school system to homeschool your kids. Homeschooling is a beautiful thing. And now what I don't mean to say is that all public school teachers or all public school systems are inherently bad or wrong. I'm not saying that. There are a lot of good administrators and teachers. I actually have members of my family that teach at a public school, so not everybody's woke. But there are some very bad ones there. And so if you have the resources or the ability to homeschool your kids, do it. Also, we need godly leaders in positions of authority. So I encourage you to consider running for school board, running for public office, getting involved in your local Republican Party as a precinct chair to make a difference for this country, because you absolutely can make a difference. Amen? And by the way, guys, early voting is Monday. Get out, get your friends out, get your family out, and go vote. We are not afraid as Texas Youth Summit to speak up for what's right, and we're going to continue to do that day in and day out. My message here today is to give you some hope, but first we have to identify the problem. And there are lots of problems. And I'm going to speak broadly to that in just a second. But first, I want to talk to the youth, specifically just to the youth in this room, because this event today is about you. And I want you to know that you've got to continue to fight the good fight to advance God's kingdom and to stand up for this country. Many of you know that you want to make a difference, but maybe you don't know how. You've thought about this for some time, but you're in a position where you're just praying. Maybe you're trying new things, and those are all the right things to do. But I just want to give you a little bit of advice. First, America is still the place of opportunity. I'm an optimist, and I don't think for 1 second that God is done with America. Amen? So if you work hard, show up on time, do your work, volunteer, good things will happen. I've never found an opportunity in my life by filling out a resume online. That's what people need to do sometimes, but every opportunity I've had has come through a relationship, so life moves at the speed of relationships. So you have to get out there and volunteer and serve, yes, to meet people. When we fail, and we will fail at sometimes. We'll fail at life, we'll fail at different jobs, we'll fail at relationships. We have to pick ourselves up, and we have to keep going. That's a part of life. You have to have that grit and tenacity to keep going. I don't need to tell some of you in this room that you need to start adulting because you already know that. Maybe some of you are already building your resumes. You're part of extracurricular activities at school. You're part of the honors program. But just as much as you build your resume, you need to build your character, because that is what's truly lasting. And maybe some of you are aspiring to be a pastor one day, or in law enforcement, or a teacher, or a doctor, a lawyer, firefighter, a variety of different jobs, politician. Maybe you want to be in politics and be a social media influencer, an author, a writer. Well, let me tell you that you can spend your entire life building up your reputation, years, even decades, but in just a few minutes or even seconds, you can lose it because of poor decision making. It's so important that you have the right moral compass, that you're able to make the right decisions. And so what that means is you have to start making the right decisions now. You have to start each and every day becoming the person that you want to be by being that person today. Don't wait. And maybe some people never get in trouble for their poor decisions. But what good is it to have a public life not match up with your private life and your private life be in shambles? The misery that some of these people have to go through. And what good is it to gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. We should set up a couple of different things in our lives. The first of which is healthy boundaries. We should have some lines that we won't cross. Some people we won't spend time with. Certain thought patterns, perhaps. Some things we don't laugh at. This takes self-discipline and self-sacrifice to become and grow into the person that God has called you to be. Second thing I want to tell you is to find accountability. Find people in your life that can speak into your life, that can tell you, hey, don't do that. It might be your parents. It could be a friend or mentor. It could be a pastor. It could be a teacher. But someone in your life who can say, your thinking is wrong. I hope you get it fixed because this is not going to end well. And I have people like that in my life. I've seen firsthand that, good parents that pray for me growing up made all the difference in the world. So I want to encourage you as a parent to pray for your kids. But if you're a young person, find accountability. The other is dealing with your critics. We're all going to have people that are critics, or maybe some of you call them haters. People that no matter what we do, just don't like us. They're going to say what they're going to say. And if you're a young person, you're too young. You don't have enough experience. You shouldn't be doing that. You have no business doing that. What do you have to offer? Well, we should take a page from Apostle Paul as he was giving Timothy some good advice. He said, "Let no one despise you because of your youth, but set an example for the believers in speech and conduct and love and faith and in purity." That's it right there. Be bold, be courageous, and be mature. Pray for the maturity as a 15-year-old, as a 20-year-old, as a 25-year-old, as a 50 and 60-year-old. Pray for that type of maturity as someone that's well above your age, but is seasoned in life, so that you grow into the person God has called you to be. I heard this quote by Eugene Peterson, and he said, "Life is a long road of obedience in the same direction. When you get sidetracked, you just have to keep going." Psalm 37:23 says, "The steps of the righteous are ordered, and God delights in their way." These are some of my thoughts on personal development for our youth. But now I have to get to what we were just talking about, the problems in this country and some hope for what we can do about it. Because the men and women, the young people in this room are the answers. And by the way, it's terrible. It's really terrible that this actually needs to be said. But there are just two genders. Amen? Look no further than problem number one, the economy. It's as bad as the days of Jimmy Carter. You know, I started out working for Ted Cruz, and I think he has some pretty good jokes. I got to hear a Ted Cruz joke the other day. He said, "The economy is so bad that Hunter Biden can't afford cocaine. The economy is so bad that Antifa can't afford bricks. The economy is so bad that Nancy Pelosi's husband can't afford more alcohol." Seriously, though, the question needs to be asked. Are you better off under Joe Biden than you were 2 years ago? You guys answered the question. It was a rhetorical question, but I want to hear you louder, actually. Are you better off than you were 2 years ago under Joe Biden? No. Exactly. The price of gas is at an all-time high, and the only reason it has gone down is because the Biden regime has taken from our strategic energy reserve, was supposed to be for a time of crisis, like war. With the way that Congress is frivolously spending on Ukraine, that looks now more inevitable than ever. But that's what that reserve is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for times of natural disaster and crisis. So we have about a month's supply left. Terrible. The stock market is down. The price of food and gas is up. Inflation is on the rise. And we haven't statistically seen 2 quarters of growth to our GDP, or gross domestic product. And what that used to mean was that we were in a recession. But the Biden regime got some economists together, and what they did was they redefined what a recession was. But make no mistake, our country is in recession, and it's because the Democrat communist policies do not work. I don't know if anybody got to see Joe Biden the other day. He was doing the meme. He was eating some ice cream. And they asked him about the economy. And he said, our economy is strong as hell, as he's eating the ice cream, just like the meme that everybody makes of him. This man is so incoherent and delusional. Our economy is not strong, and it could be so much better. We've got a lot of work to do. There will be probably quite a few people talking about the border today, but that's our second issue. This is really, really driving turnout all across the country. It's probably worse than it's ever been. Democrats love to call Republicans racist for not wanting endless immigration, illegal immigration, into our communities. But what happened when DeSantis put 50 illegal immigrants in Martha's Vineyard? What did they do immediately? They deported them, which is what our country should do. We have seen 5 million illegal aliens enter our country since Joe Biden has been president in the last 2 years. You know, there are only 25 states of the 50 states that have a population larger than 5 million. To put this in perspective, this makes up the state of 5 Delawares, 5 Montanas, and 10 Wyomings. They are on the verge of replacing you, your kids in school, our culture, and it's like we always say, a country without borders is not a country at all. This year alone, we have seen 107,000 people die of fentanyl overdose. Many of them are youth. A mother or a father shouldn't have to worry about if their kids go trick-or-treating, whether there's going to be fentanyl in that piece of candy they're getting from a stranger. But that's the place that we are in now as a country. And many of this is coming from our enemy, China. They're bringing in the fentanyl, and the drug cartels are smuggling it in. And that's not the only thing that they're smuggling. Human trafficking is at a terrible all-time high. I have heard the horror stories. I've been down to South Texas quite a few times. And maybe many of you already know about the rape trees. When these monsters who are doing the trafficking have their way with children, and they stick their undergarments as ornaments on these trees, it's absolutely terrible. Our current spending rate on Ukraine is at about 60 billion. But unfortunately, when Republicans controlled Congress, we couldn't get $5 billion for President Trump's border wall, which is an absolute shame. What we have to continue to fight for is to continue to build that wall all the way from here all the way to California. We've got to finish the wall. And you know what this contributes to when we don't stop illegal immigration? Crime. Some of you may know that I'm from Houston. And crime in major Democrat-led cities are running rampant all over the country. Democrat policies of defunding the police is how we got here. Think about it. If a police force, let's say in New Orleans, needs 1,800 police officers and they only have 800, and you know what? They have a payroll to pay them, and many of them are overworked and tired and bust their butts, and they're always on. You think about it. That's not enough. There's only so much one person can do. And when you defund the police, that's the result that you get. And when they're scared to do their jobs as law enforcement, that's the result that you get. Criminals need to have deterrence before they go commit a crime. And if there aren't any, they won't think twice. They'll do it. In Houston alone, the violent crime rate is out of control. Murder, rape, robbery, and assault. Overall, Houston saw this past year one of its deadliest years, 632 murders. God help us. And we've surpassed Dallas as the most deadliest city in Texas. This is no thanks to County Judge Lena Hidalgo, who has stolen the county commissioner's rollover funds and is trying to actively reduce the number of constables in our community. She has also denied our DA's request for more prosecutors. And you know what? The judges in these places are also an issue. Because when you set the bail too low, this is exactly what happens. When you set the bail too low, then you let them right back out. And what are they going to do when you let out a violent criminal? They're going to go commit more violent crime. We've got to fight and we've got to stand up. Because these issues that I just mentioned, the economy, the border, and crime, are in many ways the reason why people are waking up and voting Republican this November. I want to encourage all of you, whether you're young or old, to have important, critical, crucial conversations at the dinner table. And people say you're not supposed to talk about religion or politics at the dinner table. But you know what? Whenever they say, hey, I don't want to talk about that, what you say is, well, I don't really want to talk about politics either. But let me tell you why I'm passionate about America. And then you lead into what we're going to do to save it. We need men and women in this room to have courage, to fight, to stand up for this country. Because, you know what? Texas is a battleground. And as Texas goes, so goes the nation. We've got to fight for Texas and we've got to fight for America. We've got a shot at taking back Congress. And it's a foregone conclusion by many that we're going to take back the House. But the question is, by how much? But we are seeing gains in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And we could also very well take back many of these governor's races as well as the Senate. We've got to activate the churches. We've got to activate the body of Christ. Because you know what? Less than half the church is actually voting. And so we've got to wake up the body of Christ, and we've got to encourage people to get out and go vote. And you know what? If this overturning of Roe v. Wade, which is amazing, am I right? Thanks to President Trump, who appointed amazing Supreme Court justices. It happened in the midst of so many people saying it can never happen. And if that political victory of overturning Roe v. Wade has taught us anything, it's that we should never, ever, ever give up. And what people say is impossible is actually possible. And you know what? You look at September 11th, in closing, you look at September 11th, and you remember as terrorists attacked the World Trade Center. You saw the fire, you saw the hole in the World Trade Center, and you saw people running away from the fire. But what did the firefighters and first responders do? They ran right to the fire. And what we need in this room, we need men and women to stand up and fight and take back this country. We need people that are going to run to the fire, that aren't afraid of the danger. We need patriots that love America, that will stand up and say, not my family, not my community, not my state, not my country. I'm going to fight for America. This country is worth fighting for. So what we have to do is we have to truly fight, we have to stand up, and we have to vote this November, because a red wave will only happen if we make it happen. If we block walk, if we phone bank, if we call our friends and neighbors, if we bring people to the polls, if we get the word out and get the vote out, we will have a red wave this November. Let's fight. Let's stand up for this country. Thank you, guys. God bless you. God bless Texas. We have some amazing speakers coming up. We have Monica de la Cruz. And Monica de la Cruz is going to be joining us via Zoom. And I am so excited to introduce her. So as our tech team is getting that set up, let me just say that Monica de la Cruz is really a matriarch in and of herself. She's ran in the District 15, and she really paved the way last time, and she very well could have, or possibly did, but she should have won. And you know what? She's going to win this time. She's a fighter. She's a patriot. She's excited to help take back this country. She's got a great story. And I'm so very excited to introduce her. So, Nate, are we all set up? Awesome. Hello, Monica.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all? Well, those that are traveling down here to the 956, welcome to South Texas and the RGV, and to mi gente from the Rio Grande Valley. I could not be more humbled nor more proud to lead in this fight to save our country and to save Texas. What's going on here is just nothing short of a miracle. And as you and I both know, with God, all things are possible. You know, I'm born in San Benito. I was raised in Brownsville by a single mother. I attended James Pace High School, so I'm a proud Vi Queen, and made my way to the University of Texas, San Antonio, where I became a road runner and graduated with my BBA in marketing. You know, South Texas is such a special place, and it was here that I opened my first business in Alamo. And I say I'm truly a Valleyite. Born in San Benito, raised in Brownsville. My business is in Alamo. I've lived in McAllen, and now I'm very proud to be a resident of Edinburgh. I love the Rio Grande Valley. And you know what? I love this great country, just like you. You see, my grandfather served proudly in the United States Navy, and my brother served 20 years in the Air Force. And I talk to people every day, and I tell them, look, I came from simple beginnings with a single mom who worked hard to make ends meet for my brother and I. And I remember growing up, and my mom would say, look, we may not have much or a lot, but what we do have, we're going to take care of. And she made me iron my clothes, iron my shirts, iron my pants, because she said we're always going to look presentable when we go out. And you know, in those days, I drank from the manguera just like everybody else, and did slip and slide in our carport, and it was a good time. I never felt like a victim, or that we were poor, or that we couldn't afford things. In fact, I felt proud. And my mom would tell me, mijita, you are so lucky. We are so lucky to live on this side of the border because here in the United States, you can do and be anything. And that really spoke to me. And it spoke to my brother who served bravely in our country. And it spoke to me because my desire was to be a small business owner, which I have owned a successful insurance for the last 20 plus years. And probably like many of you guys sitting there today, I didn't relate to Washington, D.C. I wasn't interested in Washington, D.C. I was busy raising 2 children who are now teenagers and raising a business. And I really felt like that's where my focus was until President Trump went into becoming the nominee in 2016. And look, we know our great president was colorful. And whether you liked him or not, you were always going to pay attention to what he was going to say next. And I was one of those people. You know, I wasn't involved in the PTO, never ran for any city council or county official. That just didn't interest me. But I started to pay attention to what was happening on the national stage and started to pay attention to the media and how our president was being treated. But what really hit home was how our brave Border Patrol agents, those brave men and women who are on the front lines right here in the Rio Grande Valley, and thought, wow, these guys, these brave men and women are out there every day sacrificing for us, but look how they're being treated by the media. And I'm blessed enough to live right across from one of the main stations here off of 281. And so many of the Border Patrol agent families are in my neighborhood. And what people don't know and what they don't hear are the stories that happen in my neighborhood, such as the wives who will send out a group message on our neighborhood app and say, do you have any toys that you're not using anymore? Any books that you could give away? What they do is they take those toys and those books and they put them in their husband and wives' cars. So when they find these abandoned children from the cartel, that those Border Patrol agents can give that child a bear to hug while they're waiting, or book to look through while they're waiting in these long lines. It's so, so sad. The stories that the media won't tell you are how their husbands and wives are waking up early to make sandwiches as they come across kids your age and younger. And those are the stories of the brave men and women that I felt now is the time to stand up. Stand up for those that are protecting us, like our law enforcement and our Custom and Border Patrol agents, but stand up for our values. The way that you grew up here in the Rio Grande Valley, and I grew up, surrounded by familia, where we go to our tia's house, and we might have lunch there on a Sunday, or we spend Christmas together, Navidad, and we celebrate with our family that we love so much. That we go to quinceañera and dance songs from our beloved Selena. That's the gente from the Rio Grande Valley. The values of faith, family, and freedom. And when I say freedom, I mean the opportunity to work, the opportunity for the American dream. You see, your familia, my familia, they migrated over here, not because they wanted equal results for all of us. They didn't expect that. They came over here because they wanted equal opportunity. And we have that, my friends. When I can be a little girl from Brownsville, Texas, growing up in a home no more than 1,000 square feet from a single mom who was a secretary, and run for one of the greatest positions in this nation, next to the White House. If I can do that from the Rio Grande Valley, you can do anything. We can do anything in this great country. Your abuelita, your abuelito, they didn't want you to be a victim. They were not victims. My grandfather on my father's side picked melones, and he was proud to do that work. Your family was proud to start from where they started from and grow their family and grow their economic wealth. Because in America, that's what we can do. In 2020, I decided to stand up against the wave here in Hidalgo, the blueness of Hidalgo. And many in 2020, there were leaders in Hidalgo that would tell me straight to my face, you don't have a chance. The Rio Grande Valley will never turn red. Why don't you quit? Why don't you stop what you're doing? But in 2020, myself, along with many of you in the room sitting there today, we fought hard and we worked our tails off in 2020 to start what is happening now, the true red wave. And I think because of our hard work, we proudly got Congresswoman Mayra Flores elected this June. And I know in November, I will be absolutely so proud of her work. And we started with Congresswoman Mayra Flores. We will elect our first Republican female in Texas 15, and we will also elect Cassy Garcia in Texas 28, because we stand fiercely and we are relentless. That is why they call us the triple threat. We are the threat to what the squad is doing to our country. We will stand up against the Biden administration and what they have done to our country. And we stand proudly for the values that you have and that I represent. Those values of putting God first in our faith, our family, and the American dream. And so I thank you all today. And I know there are many, many youth in the crowd today. And I can tell you that you are the future. I am fighting for you and for my kids and my kids' kids. Because they say we're only one generation from losing our freedom. And this is that generation. And you have inspired me to keep going forward. And I invite you to join us at monicaforcongress.us. Join the fight, because you youngsters, you, the youth, are the fuel that will keep this fire burning in South Texas and allow us to be the voice for you and for our future. So I ask for you to please go to monicaforcongress.us today. Join our team, because come November 8th, we are going to flip South Texas red. And I know that God is using us. God is using us for the spear that will take the Democrat Party down. And so join me, because we will make America first, and we will fire Nancy Pelosi when elected. God bless. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you all.
Wasn't that good? Well, I have another awesome young leader to introduce to you, Cassy Garcia. Everybody give it up for Cassy Garcia. Well, as she walks to the stage, I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's a mother. She's a wife of a Border Patrol agent. She's a Trump appointee. And she's in the Cruz family. She was a protege and worked for Senator Ted Cruz. So give it up for Cassy Garcia.
Hello, RGV. Are y'all excited to be here today? Well, I am the second spicy taco here today, so going after Monica De La Cruz, but we are the Texas Triple Threat, and I can't wait to see November 8th, that red wave, that red tsunami that we're gonna see here in South Texas. Just want to say thank you so much for everybody that is here at the Texas Youth Summit, and thank you to Christian Collins for the invitation to come back here to the Rio Grande Valley. This is a special place, and I've gotten to meet so many amazing people that have traveled outside of the state to be here today at the Texas Youth Summit. So thank you to everybody that's here in a very, very, very special place that I call home. It is truly an honor to be amongst so many patriots and freedom fighters who are ready for a better way forward. I am Cassy Garcia, and I'm so honored to be the Republican nominee for Congressional District 28. I am a proud third-generation Texan. I'm also the proud wife of a Border Patrol agent who has served this great country for 26 years. I want everybody to know that I grew up right here in the Rio Grande Valley, and I've lived here my entire life. My great-grandfather came legally to the United States because he wanted to live the American dream. And my grandfather fought for this great country in the Vietnam War. And my mother and my stepfather worked in the public school system for 36 years. And just like so many families in South Texas, I grew up being told that if you set your mind to something, that you can achieve anything in America. In my family, my stepfather worked 2 jobs. He was a teacher by day, and he was a musician by night. And he would work extra to help us to do extracurricular activities. So I knew that he was working hard so that we could live a great life. And I took that to heart, and I became the first in my family to go to college. And that's why I'm running for Congress, to make sure people in South Texas can live the American dream and are never hindered by liberal government overreach. Democrats have controlled this district for over 110 years. And my opponent, Henry Cuellar, who's represented this district for 17 years, but he's been serving in public office since I've been in kindergarten, and I'm 41 years old. And what do we have to show for it? Skyrocketing inflation and the worst border crisis we have ever seen. And what has he done about this? Instead of working to bring down prices and curb inflation, Henry Cuellar just voted for a bill that will make inflation worse. We don't need 87,000 IRS agents, my friends. We don't. What we need are 87,000 more Border Patrol agents, more custom officers, and more security school officers. That's what we need. And instead of dealing with the worst border crisis we've ever seen, Henry Cuellar opposed infrastructure for our southern border. You know, Cuellar's too busy kissing up to California liberal Nancy Pelosi, voting with her 96% of the time, instead of doing what needs to be done here to address the border crisis and inflation. Let me put it this way. Nancy Pelosi supports Henry Cuellar, but the National Border Patrol Council supports me in this race. For the past 17 years, I've been working in public service, fighting for conservative principles and to secure our southern border. For several years, I worked for the Texas Commission of Agriculture, where I helped to make sure farmers and ranchers in South Texas had the resources and the freedom to be successful. Under President Trump, I was appointed as the commissioner of the White House Hispanic Prosperity Initiative, where we worked to make sure Hispanics had the educational and economic opportunities they needed to live the American dream. And for 8 years, I was Senator Ted Cruz's deputy state director, where I was laser focused on fixing the border crisis, from meeting with farmers and ranchers who have illegal immigrants crossing their land to local leaders who are trying to deal with a huge influx of illegal immigrants under President Biden. So I know firsthand what this district is going through when it comes to the border crisis. I can't wait to retire Henry Cuellar because I believe securing the border I believe securing the border isn't a red or a blue issue, my friends. It is a red, white, and blue issue. I believe we need to get our spending under control so we don't have skyrocketing inflation and Texans can put food on their tables and gas in their cars. I believe we need to have energy independence and bring more jobs and more opportunities to the Rio Grande Valley. And I will tell you this, my friends, what we've seen here in the Rio Grande Valley is an absolutely amazing shift. We saw the win with Mayra Flores on June 14. She made history as the first Mexican American-born congresswoman. And I'll say it right here, that red wave that sent Mayra Flores to Congress on June 14th is that same red wave that's going to send Monica de la Cruz to Congress. And it is that same red wave that's going to send me to Congress come November 8th. And it is that same red wave that's going to send Nancy Pelosi packing. My friends, we are here today because we are Americans first. We love this country with all of our hearts. We talk about living the American dream, faith, family, freedom, hard work. And I'm telling you, the Democrat Party has left the Hispanic community. People are waking up every single day. We are crisscrossing this district up and down, which my district extends from the Rio Grande Valley, Starr County, all the way up into Guadalupe County, past San Antonio, Laredo. And I'm meeting voters every single day that tell me, Cassy, I've been Democrat my whole entire life, but I'm voting Republican for the first time for you come this November. I want to tell you, I'm so incredibly blessed. I truly am. And I thank my parents every single day because I was given so many opportunities here in the Rio Grande Valley. I started my career here in the Rio Grande Valley. My first job was 16 at Peter Piper Pizza in Edinburgh, Texas. And right when I got out of college, my first job was with City of McAllen. So my opportunities were right here. I started my career, and I'm so blessed with the opportunities, and I want to make sure that we continue those opportunities for everybody here in South Texas, and I can't wait. When we fire Henry Cuellar November 8th, I will be the first Hispanic female to ever represent this great district, 28. So thank you to everybody that's here today. Make sure we start early voting on Monday, October 24th. We are 17 days away, my friends, to making history across South Texas. All eyes are watching these seats up and down the ballot, and we are going to send a strong message to the Democrats and to Robert Francis O'Rourke that we're going to send him packing come this November. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting us. Thank you for doing what you do, block walking, making those phone calls, poll watching. Thank you. You are leading this movement. And to the young Republicans that are here today, everybody that is here, you inspire me every single day. Thank you for what you're doing. You are the change, and you're the reason why I am fighting for you. You are the reason why I decided to get in this fight to protect the American dream, to protect this great country that I love, and to protect our southern border. And that is what we're going to do when we take back the House come this November. Thank y'all so very much. God bless each and every one of you. We are so blessed to live in the greatest country on the entire planet, and we are going to protect the greatest country on the entire planet. So God bless each of you. God bless Texas, and God bless this convention. Thank y'all.
Well, we have another exceptional leader, young leader and candidate, Mayra Flores. We played the music before I even got to tell you a little bit about her. Wife of a Border Patrol agent, leader, an amazing candidate that's attracted so much energy and zeal to South Texas. And you know what? There's a lot of people after her district changed a bit that said this wasn't winnable. Because after she won the special election, it went from a -6 to a -16. But you know what? With God, all things are possible. And I don't know what it is about Mayra, but people just love her. And so now they're calling this district a toss-up, Texas 34. So without further ado, give it up for Congresswoman Mayra Flores.
Thank you so much. Wow. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and making time out of your day to be here with all of us. What a beautiful God-given day to be gathered here in God's country. Because South Texas is God's country. I want to start by saying thank you to the Texas Youth Summit for bringing this amazing event here in Hidalgo County for the first time ever. And we hope is the first of many more visits. I also want to extend a warm welcome to Kayleigh McEnany and Christian Collins, of course, and their amazing team. Thank you for coming here to South Texas and believing in us. And thank you. Christian Collins has believed in me since day one. You know, when no one believed in us, Christian Collins was right there, right beside me, inspiring me and pushing me and telling me, yes, you can do this, just keep on going. So I'm forever grateful to you, my friend, for doing that. And as a resident of Hidalgo County, a longtime friend of the Texas Youth Summit, and now a member of Congress, it means so much to welcome all of you to the RGV, and it's great to be surrounded by freedom-loving youth. If you've been following the awakening that is taking place in the RGV, you know we're witnessing something special, not just politically, but spiritually. Conservatives have shown that with prayer, hard work, determination, and with the right message, we can change politics for the better in our community, our state, and in our country. This is a moment for all of us to thank God for everything He's done for us, all His amazing blessings, and in particular, the privilege He's given to each and one of us to live in the greatest state, country in the world. But with such blessing also comes great responsibility. Responsibility to those around us and to those that are yet to come. Each of us are here because we believe in the American dream. I want you to know this. Every single one of you is living the American dream. I didn't accomplish the American dream when I became a member of Congress. I accomplished the American dream way before that. I ran for Congress to fight to keep the American dream alive. I was born in Burgos, Tamaulipas, Mexico. Anybody here has family in Mexico or born in Mexico? Eso. And I was born in Burgos, Tamaulipas, Mexico, raised with strong conservative values. It's an amazing town where you're raised to love God, value family, and they teach you that if you work hard, you can accomplish anything. And those values were instilled in me and run in my blood, and I will always fight for them no matter what. Because no political party is worth you putting your values aside. Your values come first. Your faith in God, your family, that should always be top priority. And, blessed to come here when I was 6 years old. Both my parents were migrant workers. We moved a lot growing up. And I started working alongside my parents at 13 years old in the cotton fields, instilling in me the value of hard work. Graduated from San Benito, became a respiratory care practitioner. I'm a proud Border Patrol wife. I am a mother of 4. That is the American dream. And I accomplished the American dream. So I decided to run because I saw that the American dream was being taken away from our children. And I thought to myself, if someone like me that was born in Mexico can come here and accomplish so much, I want to make sure that our kids do as well. And I saw how South Texas has been taken for granted for so long. They say that the Democrat Party is for the poor. They are for poverty. That's right. All they're good at is creating poverty. That's right. Because they want to keep you poor. They want to keep you poor so they can continue controlling you. I want prosperity. I want us to lead in this country. I want Texas District 34 to become leaders of the United States of America. Because you elected the first Mexican-born ever in Congress, here from South Texas. No one can take that away from us. So I see the potential in us. See, the Democrat Party and my opponent sees no potential in us. See, my opponent thinks that you need him. No. I'm here to work for you. We need to remind Washington who they work for. We work for you. And this government has gone so powerful that they forget who they work for. I want to give back the people the control of their lives. If you notice, they've taken away our money. And I believe that you should have more money in your pockets, your hard-earned money. And you spend it the best way you think it is. It's your money. Why does the government continue to take away and take away and take away? And I feel like the more successful you are, the more they want to take away. The more. So they make it so hard. And then they want to pay people for not working. No. They want us to be there. They want us to stay there, to continue controlling them. That's not what I want for our children. That's not what I want for us. Because I believe in the Hispanic community. I believe in all of us. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, African American, or white. We're all Americans. We all bleed red. But see, the Democrat Party, they don't see us as Americans. You know, I am their worst nightmare. I'm pretty sure now the Democrat Party is like, you know, or now thinking about, you know, we need to send Mayra back to Mexico. You know, I think it took Mayra Flores to become a member for them to be for deportation, right? That's what happened, because all I keep getting is like, go back to Mexico, go back to Mexico. I was like, I thought y'all were for immigrants. I thought y'all were for women. And I'm not getting any love here. I mean, just a few days ago, I was told not to speak Spanish, that we were in America. I was like, wow. It bothers them so much. But what it's shown that they've never been for us. They've never been for immigrants. They've never been for Hispanic, for the American people. They only care about themselves and their political party. That's the difference. You see, I'm not loyal to political parties. I'm conservative, yes. I'm Republican, but I'm not loyal to a political party. My loyalty is with God. My father, who was a Democrat all his life, said, don't make the same mistake I did when I told him that I was going to be running. You know, I was loyal to a party that wasn't a representation of how I raised you, of how I was raised. But because I always voted that way, I kept voting. I was loyal to a party. So I'm asking you that if in 20, 30 years, the Republican Party no longer stands for those values, I don't want you to be loyal to the party. I want you to be loyal to God, to the values that were instilled in you. And it's so true. He is the John F. Kennedy type of Democrat. And he says, I didn't walk away. They walked away from me. They are no longer fighting for the values that were instilled in me. And it's heartbreaking because at the end of the day, we want two healthy parties. We want what's best for the president because we're all in the same boat and we're all sinking. And it's heartbreaking to see that you have an administration that you're constantly fighting against. And they're supposed to be wanting what's best for this country. Because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. This is our country. This is very difficult because it wasn't this way. We're not talking anymore. We stopped talking to each other. And I believe that was the goal. You know, Russia, China, they see us all as Americans. They don't see us as Democrats or Republicans. You think that the day that we're no longer here on earth, you think God's going to ask you, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? You think he's going to ask you that? No. He's not going to ask you that. But they want us divided to weaken us as a country. And I ask the entire country, I ask my district, I ask South Texas, let's come together for what's best for our community, for what's best for our country, for what's best for our children. Look what this administration is doing. I'm talking to people every single day, talking to a single mother who said, for the first time, I had to get a loan to buy my child's school supplies and clothes because I just didn't have enough. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay the loan back. Speaking to many of our elderly who say, I'm going to have to go back to work because my retirement is just not enough. I made a man who said, I'm very upset with this administration because my wife, 29 years of marriage, almost 30 years of marriage, he said, never had to work. She stayed home, took care of the family. Now I'm very upset, and I'm voting Republican because my wife now has to work. And he's like, and I miss my wife being home, and it hurts me and it kills me that I can't provide, that it's not enough what I make for my family. And so these are the real issues that are impacting people, and that are not impacting certain people, just, no, Democrats or Republicans, it's affecting all of us. Washington is, what's going in South Texas? What's going on? Why are they voting for Mayra Flores? Well, one, because she has common sense, right? And because she's putting her constituents in her district first. She's putting the people that elected her to be in that position first. And that's what every elected member of Congress should be doing. My opponent is a member of Congress in Texas 15. What are you doing here? What are you doing in Texas 34? You've been a member of Congress for 3 terms. But yet, he wants to come here and do nothing, just like he's done nothing in Texas 15. Enough is enough. Border security is a top issue in our community. As someone who immigrated to this country, I want more little girls like Mayra to be able to come here. But I don't want little girls to have to come through illegally where they get abused and go through literally hell to come here to this country. I'm from Tamaulipas. It's nowhere near the state that I grew up in, and it hurts. It hurts because my family and my loved ones are still there. And I wish that I could visit them more often. And I try my best. And it's because of these criminal organizations that we cannot continue to support this administration that is encouraging people to come here knowing the dangers. Let's focus on legal immigration. Let's improve the legal process so it doesn't take 10, 15, 20 years. And immigration reform is important. We want to encourage the good people to come here legally, to work hard, to accomplish the American dream, but we want them to come here legally. So our Border Patrol agents are able to focus on the fentanyl that is coming into our country. And if you have not talked to your child about fentanyl, please take the time to talk to your children. And those of you, kids, listen up. This drug will kill you. Don't take any chances. Talk to your friends about this dangerous drug, that it takes this small for it to take away your beautiful life. And we have one life, one body. Your mama, your daddy, they love you. You are their engine. Don't take a chance. Say no to drugs. Tell your teachers, tell your friends if you see this drug in your school, because it's happening. And parents, I need you to be a voice for your kids. Get to know their teachers. Attend a school board meeting. Know what is being taught at your child's school. It is so important for us to be involved in our children's education. Take time to instill the values that were instilled in you into your child, because we want, foremost, that our values live forever. Forever. Briefly, here's what at stake in this coming elections. Conservatives believe in personal responsibility. The left is pushing and believes in more big government dependency. We believe in freedom and following the Constitution. The left wants to take away our rights and totally ignore and, worse, rewrite the Constitution to fit their woke narrative. We believe in secure borders and supporting the brave men and women of law enforcement. The left call us racist for supporting the rule of law. Imagine that. They call someone who was born in Burgos, Tamaulipas, racist. Makes no sense. I'm telling you, they've lost their mind. We believe in defending life in all stages. They believe in the right to choose between life or death and up to 9 months of pregnancy. 9 months of pregnancy. I am a woman. I am a mother. And God gave me my identity, not the government. Don't allow the government to give you your identity. God already gave you your identity. Success in November and the future of our nation is in your hands. Early voting starts next week. Take your abuelitas, your aunts, tíos, tías, cousins, you name it. Spread the chisme, spread the gossip, okay? Take everyone to go vote on Monday, of course, for Mayra Flores, but to vote conservative, to vote for their best interest. It is up to us to ensure, and we fight to put Americans first and let our victory tide us and rise our boats. Victory is in sight, but we can't slow down. That is why what each of you do, it is so important. Every door knock, every phone call, every sign you put up, it all matters so much. And it is why we're going to win coming this November. Dijeron que no íbamos a ganar. Qué equivocados estaban. They were very wrong. They said we weren't going to win. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. And through hard work, look at us where we're at. And we're going to continue nonstop. I get very little sleep. I'm like, no, yo duermo después. I'll sleep on November 9th. I'll survive. You've also had the chance to hear from my amazing amigas today, Monica and Cassy, who will be going to DC with me coming this January. Mis grandes amigas. No, it takes hard work and good friends to take the fight to Washington. I am honored to have your support and your continued prayers. I need every one of you to be praying for me. Because today, honestly, I wouldn't be standing where I'm at if it wasn't because of the continued prayers I get every single day. I live in prayer every day. So it's important that we pray every single day, not only for our country, for our leaders, for our children. Mi abuelita vivía con la Biblia. My grandma, she always had a Bible right beside her. And she's no longer with me, but I know that her prayers still live. I really do. I'm honored to have your support and your prayers. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do. Let's run hard to finish the line and put our faith and our will in God's hand. Gracias. Dios me los bendiga. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. I forgot something. Let me see. Well, let's talk about the Texas Youth Summit. I would not be here on this stage if it wasn't because of them. So I wanted to talk to you about all the amazing things that they're doing, not only here in South Texas, but in the entire state. So the Texas Youth Summit has done so much already and can do so much more if they have more resources. The Texas Youth Summit is educating our youth with conservative and Christian values. And it's so important that organizations like this invest in our youth. They are the future of this country. So it's so important that we take the time to educate our little ones, our teenagers, about our conservative values. And this organization is doing just that. Texas Youth Summit is hosting events like this one all over the state. Their goal is also to continue to do events like this in South Texas. They're coming back, guys, and grow what we're doing today into something bigger every year. I want to encourage you to give in a big way to the Texas Youth Summit's efforts so they can continue to hire a team that can come down and help us continuing spreading the conservative message. Envelopes are being passed around the room if you would like to give. And also, you can go online on texasyouthsummit.com as we watch this short video. Texas Youth Summit videos plays. What are y'all going to be playing?
This is one of the most hope-filled events I've seen in a long time.
The left has control of Hollywood, the mainstream media, our education system, and in social media.
They want to control what you believe. They want to control what you do. They want to cancel you if you dare differ.
The Marxist movement is after the hearts and minds of our young people.
We have more young people that have ingratitude towards America than gratitude.
Everything starts at the foundation, and that is youth and getting them before they're indoctrinated.
We need to educate young people on limited government, fiscal responsibility, American exceptionalism, and the Judeo-Christian values that America was founded on.
We live in a world where the press is constantly negative towards anything conservative, Christian.
You see, communism needs to destroy Christianity because your allegiance must be to Almighty government and not to God.
And you're all here today because you feel that happening in your high schools. You see the propaganda on TikTok, on Instagram.
We are up against a multi-trillion-dollar mainstream media complex. We're up against a multi-trillion-dollar social media complex.
Texas is one of the most important states because we're seeing leftist ideologies creep across the state very rapidly.
I'm thrilled to be at the Texas Youth Summit. It's an incredible gathering of young people.
It's so exciting to see youth of today get taught those values.
It's reminding these young people that they're not alone, that they are not truly in the minority, that there is a vast majority.
God has a purpose for your life. Don't think that your life is an accident.
We are all here for such a time as this, in this place, in this circumstance, for a purpose.
God can use you. Give yourself to service to others and making a difference for God.
If we sit idly by and do nothing, we're going to lose the greatest nation ever to exist in the history of the world.
As conservatives, we need to be vocal. We need to be unafraid. Texas Youth Summit is all about standing up and saying, I want to be free.
We save the country as soon as every single person who agrees with us starts speaking out.
We live in the greatest state in the entire union and the most exceptional nation in the entire world. That is something to cheer about, isn't it?
Wow. Amazing. Now, introducing you to Kayleigh McEnany, former press secretary for President Trump, author of an incredible book, For Such a Time as This, Fox News host on Outnumbered. She is truly an inspiration to women everywhere.
Yeah. It's so funny now.
Wonderful to see all of you today. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And my son as well, you introduced. That's great. He'll be here the end of next month. So very exciting times. Well, it is wonderful to be here in Weslaco. It really is. And I will say what an incredibly distinct honor to share the stage with so many strong, conservative Latina women. I mean, Mayra Flores, wow. I've won a district and one of the first Republican congresswoman from the Rio Grande Valley since 1871. I mean, that's quite something. And of course, Monica de la Cruz and Cassy Garcia. I've had the pleasure of meeting them today and visiting with them. Such strong women, so it's an honor to be here. But let me back up a little, and we'll get to some of the issues because it's important that we do. But just to share with you a little bit about who I am and my personal journey, a lot changed for me over the last few years. Namely, I got to become President Trump's press secretary. And it happened totally out of the blue. I was not expecting it. It was during COVID-19 that was just emerging, the pandemic, and I'm on his campaign at the time, and I had a daughter who was a few months old, and I'm traveling the country with my mom, going to all of the places you'd think you'd go for a campaign: Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. We're making makeshift cribs in hotel rooms for my little daughter, and then all of a sudden COVID-19 hits, and like that, the world locks down. And for me, that meant going to Florida. Not a bad place to lock down, I will say. A lot of great beaches there. But you know, we're here, COVID-19's happening. I'm riding in the back seat with my daughter who's beside me. My mom's in the front seat. Driving along, I'll never forget, going over a bridge, and I see a number call my phone. And now when the White House switchboard calls you, it's kind of an odd series of numbers, so it's not your conventional set of numbers. It's not like you could recognize it. And I said to my mom, I think this is the president. I'd only ever gotten probably 2 to 3 calls maximum from President Trump in the White House, and I thought, this is him. So I answer the phone, and indeed I'm right. They said, this is the White House switchboard. We have President Trump for you. Do you want to take his call? Okay, well, of course. You're not going to say, no, have the president hold. So I take a pink pacifier. I put it to my daughter's lips. I pray she doesn't cry. And I take the call from the president. And he said, I have a question for you. I thought his question would be something like, oh, great job on this TV hit. Where did you get this fact or statistic, or great job writing this article? I worked for his campaign. But instead, he took me totally by surprise, and he said, would you like to be my White House press secretary? To which I said, Mr. President, that would be the honor of a lifetime. To which he said something like, Mark, get it done. And I think he meant Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, get it done. And Mark got it done. I will say I was nervous to take the job. I mean, communicating with the American people during a once-in-a-generation COVID-19 outbreak that we've never seen, more than a generation, since we'd seen anything like that. So I'm calling former press secretaries. I'm calling people in the administration. My husband drove me up in his truck up the Eastern Corridor. I didn't want to go on a plane. I thought if the press saw me on a plane, they'd say, new press secretary on a plane, endangering the president. So you know how the headlines can go. So I said it's safest just for us to drive up. So we drove up, and I'm making these calls. I'm reading academic journal articles on how to be a good press secretary. There are like 2 that exist. So I'm doing all this research. And then my dad texted me and said, Kayleigh, maybe you were made for such a time as this, a reference to the book of Esther. And I believe when God wants to send you a message, he will oftentimes send you the exact same message, sometimes through 2 very different sources. Because I can tell you, you cannot get more ideologically different, politically speaking, than my father, than Van Jones of CNN, who is on the left, but he texted me a few weeks into the job and said, maybe you were made for such a time as this. He's a brother in Christ. And I knew God wanted me to hear that. I think it's something he wants us all to hear, because we live in very uncertain times, and I believe he can use each and every one of us in this room to rise to the moment. And for me, that time began on April 13th, 2020. It was my first day on the job as press secretary. I had to walk the perimeter of the White House to get to work. You have to go in this one specific entrance on your first day. So it's pouring rain outside, not ideal. I walk the perimeter of the White House. I go in the entrance I'm supposed to go into. I sit in the press secretary's office, take a deep breath, and take in this moment. It was surreal. I had been a White House intern during the Bush administration, so I remember watching Dana Perino give a press briefing, never knowing that more than 10 years later, I would be the one taking the questions. So I'm taking this in. I don't know how my first day is going to go. And then I get a call, I think it was from the Chief of Staff's office. Hey, come in, the president has a coronavirus task force briefing, come in and brief the president. I walk into the Oval Office, past this grandfather mahogany clock off to the left, onto this sunbeam pattern rug from the Reagan era. I sit on this gold couch across from the Resolute desk. The Resolute desk was given to the United States of America in 1880 by Queen Victoria. It's that historic desk, you've all seen it, iconic in pictures throughout history. I'm sitting there, and the president comes in and sits down. One thing they don't tell you when you take a job in communications or in press is you really have to learn to adapt to your boss's style. So there's no formula for it, there's no recipe, you just have to learn how to be an asset, really in real time. So I'm watching him, and he had a binder just kind of like this one, a small one, and he was flipping through the pages, reading his opening remarks for this press conference. And I noticed he would take a Sharpie and cross out parts he didn't like and write in parts he wanted. And I'm thinking, you could just ask your staff to do that. But he was very much take initiative, make the edits himself. So I watched him do this, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to have any time to prep him for questions. And so he gets up, he's about to go to the briefing, and I say, Mr. President, I know what they're going to ask you today. He says, what's that? And I said, well, basically, Dr. Fauci went out on CNN, and he made a comment. The press is spinning it out of context, and they're suggesting if we would have done mitigation sooner, perhaps it could have helped alleviate COVID-19. And I said, they're just going nuts with it. And he said, well, what would you say in response to the criticism? And at the time, I had all the facts in my head, and I said, I would say on January 6th of 2020, there are 0 cases of COVID in this country, and you issued a travel notice for Wuhan. January 17th, 0 cases of COVID. You put health screenings in 3 major international airports. January 21st, 1 case of COVID. You opened an emergency operations center. On January 31st, you issued a travel ban on China, one that your opponent called xenophobic. And he said, go type that up. So I run back to my office. I type it up. I give it to him. And on that very first day of mine, I watched him read the answer verbatim, word for word, which I'd never seen him do before that. I had never seen him do after that. And I thought to myself, job well done on my first day. But as it turns out, I think he was just doing that to make me feel welcome on my first day as the newbie. But nevertheless, it certainly made me feel welcome. I didn't know, though, watching him stand at the podium and answering these questions, whether he would ever ask me to give a briefing. It had been 400 days since a press secretary had ever given a briefing. The last one was by my predecessor, Sarah Sanders. So one day, I think it was like a Wednesday, he looked at me and said, Kayleigh, do a briefing. I thought to myself, okay, we're going to need a few weeks to get a binder together because my binder became a subject of interest to reporters. They actually had a camera above my head in the press briefing room and would take pictures of the binder. And CNN had an article decoding the mysteries of Kayleigh McEnany's briefing binder, and they tried to figure out the tabs, which they'd be, whatever the topic was of the day, therapeutic, COVID, whatever it was. So one day we thought we'd do a head fake and put the names of the reporters like Jim Acosta, Caitlin Collins as the tabs. We never did it, but nevertheless, they were very interested in the binder, which I wanted to give myself a few weeks to put together. But the president said on the Wednesday, do a briefing. He said it again on a Wednesday, do a briefing. Then all of a sudden Thursday comes and he goes, do a briefing and do it before Monday. Okay, that leaves Friday. So crunch time, we're in my office, I had a great team. We prepped until about 10 p.m. that day. We have a wood-burning fireplace in the press secretary's office. We'd all huddle around it and just spend hours and hours making calls to heads of departments, to secretaries from various agencies, agency heads, collecting all this information. So I felt very prepared as I went home that evening before my first briefing, which was May 1st, 2020. But more important than this academic preparation I put in was the spiritual preparation. I listened to a Joyce Meyer sermon about faith over fear. I listened to Christian music. I tweeted out Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I got ready to go in on that day of May 1st. I go in and I start getting texts from friends, from former colleagues, from people around the country who said they've been praying for me. One such came from Sarah Sanders, and Sarah Sanders sent me a list of advice, and her last piece of advice was this: most importantly, pray. Let God carry you through the tough times, give you strength when you don't have any wisdom. And then she told me that she read her Jesus Calling devotional before every press briefing, and she sent me her devotional from exactly 2 years prior to the day of my first briefing. And here's what her devotional said: you are on the path of my choosing. There is no randomness about your life. As you give yourself more and more to a life of constant communion with me, you will find that you simply have no time to worry. But I worried a lot that day because I'm just a human. And to the point of being in tears in my office, and my assistant came in, you're supposed to be at the briefing, like you can't be here in your office. She put my parents on speakerphone. We said a prayer together. I went back to the private dining room, and the president was there. I think Jared Kushner was there, and Mark Meadows, and the vice president, who motioned towards me with praying hands and said he'd been praying for me. I went to the private bathroom there in the West Wing. I got on my knees, I said a prayer, and then I went to the podium. And when I tell you, I went from complete nerves, worry, apprehension in my office to standing at the podium with a total and complete serenity that defied all understanding, as if I had been standing there my whole life. That is exactly what happened. But it didn't happen because of me. It didn't. It happened because there were millions of men and women of faith across this country who prayed for our administration, who repeatedly pray for their leaders. And I want to thank you for doing that, because I can tell you we felt it, and I certainly did on that day of my first briefing, May 1st, 2020. So thank you very much for that. But that's a little bit looking back. I think it's important that we look forward, particularly now, because the times are pretty tough, and there's just simply no doubt about it. It is interesting, though, to hear from the administration one thing, and to go out and talk to the American people, which I do pretty much every weekend in a different part of the country, and I just hear something entirely different. It's almost as if there's a fairy tale land and then there's a factual world, and they could not be more different. For instance, I don't know if you saw earlier in the week, there was a clip of our president eating an ice cream cone. And I'm in a church, so I won't use his exact words, but he said the economy is strong as down under, and I don't mean Australia. That's not how people feel at this very moment. In fact, he started the year by saying it's been a year of enormous progress. Well, let's talk about that progress. Inflation is at a 40-year high. 40-year high. It was 1.2% when he took office, 1.4%. It's now at 8.2%. So what does the White House tell us? Instead of looking at us and saying, I feel your pain, this is tough, this is a 40-year high, they tell us that inflation's holding steady. That's what the new press secretary said. It's holding steady. Okay, well, not good when it's holding steady at a 40-year high. That is like your child going from a 4.0 GPA to a 2.0, and you saying, I'm so proud of you, John. You're holding steady at a 2.0. I mean, that's just not something you say, but that's the talking point from the White House. And it's really an insult to every single American who pays more, not just at CVS or the grocery store, but also at the pump. It's really interesting, too, to hear their talking points when you talk about gas prices. Here's what the White House fact sheet said this week. White House fact sheet: gas prices fell at the fastest rate in over a decade this summer. Press secretary last week said that Americans are saving $420 million every day on gas. Okay, well, I fill up at the pump and it's $118. I'm not saving anywhere near millions, nor are the American people. The national average is $3.85. The national average when President Biden took office was $2.39. But again, insulting the American people. And probably the most insulting of all is just after the tragic stain on our country's conscience that was the fall of Afghanistan. The president said, he was asked, are you over-promising? And he said, no, I'm over-performing. I don't think anyone feels that the president of the United States is over-performing. And then his press secretary, when asked about all this, his last press secretary, Jen Psaki, was asked about the pain of the American people. She said, "My advice to everyone who is frustrated, sad, angry, feel those emotions, go to a kickboxing class or have a margarita." I don't want a kickboxing class, Jen. I don't want a margarita, but I do want my country back. And here we are in South Texas, and what we see in polling cropping up is the issue of immigration. It is such an important issue. And, I had written what I wanted to say to you all just 2 days ago, and I had written, we're 22 days into October, and we still don't have September numbers from our southern border that the American people deserve, that we are entitled to have. Well, as it turns out, there was a Friday night dump at 11 p.m. That is what you do, by the way, if you want to bury news. You put something out Friday night at 11 p.m. They put out the new border numbers for September. So September, what they found, 227,000 encounters at the southern border. That is a record, highest it has ever been in the month of September. Fiscal year 2022, 2.4 million border encounters, the highest ever in a single year. That's like the entire population of Ireland, roughly, that has crossed the southern border during this president's administration. And what's so interesting, in addition to the terror watch list, there have been 99 such individuals known or suspected on the terror watch list that crossed the border. When you add together the past 5 years, that is roughly double the past 5 years. So putting all of the security concerns aside, too, what has been so interesting is the cover-up when it comes to the number of migrant deaths on our southern border. I was told the Democrat Party was the party of compassion, that they cared so deeply, and yet they weren't publishing these numbers. And, in my job in news, I would look at some of the news and you'd see these tragic stories about a young child swept away from his mother's arms and killed in the Rio Grande. And you'd try to find the numbers and you couldn't find them because the federal government stopped publishing them. Well, one of my colleagues at Fox News today exclusively obtained that number. The number of migrant deaths for the fiscal year 2022 was 864. So don't tell me the Democrat Party is the party of compassion when they won't look in a camera and say, "Do not come here, it is perilous. There are children who are being killed, there is smuggling, there is human trafficking, there are cartels, there are drugs on the southern border." I am tired of hearing about the party of compassion. I'm tired of hearing about it when, here's a headline again, and it's interesting, you don't see the media report any of this, right? Outside of Fox and a few other outlets, National Review, you don't see them cover this. It's few and far between that there's any coverage of what's happening on the southern border. Like this, there was a lawsuit filed by a group of immigrants who crossed the border. One was from a 13-year-old Honduran girl, and here's what she said. They had so many children crossing the southern border, they had to create emergency intake facilities to take in these children. Here's the description she had of the food she's eating. "Many times I have been given chicken that was bloody and raw. I remember that during one meal, my friend was given chicken that still had feathers in it, and she had to pull them out." Where is AOC? Where is Kamala Harris? Where's the party of compassion? CBS, there's only been, and I've only seen, there may be a few more, but what I've seen are only 2 mainstream network news articles detailing about what has happened on our southern border over the past 2 years, in particular with relation to these children in these facilities. At Fort Bliss U.S. Army Base, for instance, according to CBS, the children constantly have to be monitored for self-harm, panic attacks, and escape attempts. They've had to confiscate pencils, pens, scissors, nail clippers, toothbrushes, because children are using them to try to inflict self-harm. Okay? CBS covered this. You don't hear anyone else. And CBS barely on their own airwaves decided to cover their own story. ABC News, in fact, a Houston-based site. Again, these are all sites that many of them, the press are not even allowed in. So this is just scratching the surface of what's happening on the border. There were girls between the ages of 13 and 17 that were having to use the bathroom in plastic bags, forcing the facility to shut down entirely. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Because the party of compassion should be the first party, that's what they tell us, to send AOC to the southern border, to send our border czar Kamala Harris to the southern border, to knock on the doors of these facilities and make sure that these children are not in these conditions. But they're not here. Where is Joe Biden? He hasn't even been here. He hasn't even been here because, newsflash, they do not care. Human people are pawns in their very sad, sick game. And that is what we've seen every day on the southern border. I don't have to tell you, you see it, you hear the stories, and the Democrat Party is nowhere to be found. And when we can find them exerting their voices on this issue, what are they doing? Demonizing Border Patrol. You know, it broke this week. Alejandro Mayorkas, right? This guy who's doing such a great job. Not at all. We found out this week, thanks to a FOIA request, I believe it was Heritage Foundation, they were able to FOIA request his emails, that on September 24th, 2021, this is when the so-called Border Patrol whipping incident happened, that picture that went viral, and Border Patrol were accused of whipping migrants. He got an email at 12:05 p.m. with a note from the photographer who took the picture saying, "I've never seen them whip anyone. He was swinging it, but it can be misconstrued when you're looking at the picture." Also, the lensman involved in taking that picture likewise said it never happened. So our head of DHS learns this. He oversees Border Patrol. They work for him. And what does he do? 2 hours later, he goes to a press conference and tells the nation, "Our nation saw horrifying images that do not reflect who we are. We know that those images painfully conjured up the worst elements of our nation's ongoing battle against systemic racism." The same day, his boss, President Biden, said, "I promise you these people will pay." And they knew all along that the incident never happened, but they ran with it because they had an agenda, and they still do. And meanwhile, fentanyl's pouring across our border. I saw a headline today, 26 states have this brightly colored fentanyl that we know is causing so many deaths among America's young people and older people as well, but especially among our nation's youth. The cartels are running rampant. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, a socialist guy, apparently emptying his prisons and sending people across the southern border. This is a national security issue. It proliferates all aspects of society. We have a president who doesn't care. And then you look beyond the economy, you look beyond immigration, and you look to the issues that I find to be the two most important as a Christian for me, and that's the issue of life, and that's the issue of religious liberty. And what we see there is, as a movement, as conservatives, it can be frustrating when you look at all these issues economically, the immigration issue. But on these two issues, I can tell you this, that we are winning. Because Roe v. Wade, it left a moral stain on this country that cannot be undone. Yes, it's been overturned. That is great. But 63 million children died at the hands of abortion post-Roe. That is roughly 1/5 of the current United States population. Think about that. 1/5 of the population just not here because of this egregious decision by the Supreme Court, which was thankfully overturned. And meanwhile, the White House was asked, Jen Psaki was asked, is a baby at 15 weeks? At 15 weeks, a baby has arms and legs, a baby's moving rapidly, the baby's eyes are closed, but the baby can sense light, the baby has a heartbeat. But the White House would not say whether this is a baby. Justice Roberts, however, he came out very boldly in the oral arguments for the Dobbs case and said this, that we are one of 7 countries in the entire world, 7, that allow abortion electively after 20 weeks. That puts us in the good company of North Korea and the People's Republic of China. So when I say that we are a pariah among nations when it comes to our abortion laws, that is where we stood until this happened, until the Dobbs decision happened and these beautiful words became the law of the land. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. Great day. Because I will tell you, it is not a woman's right to choose, it is a baby's right to live. That is the bottom line when it comes to the issue of life. But what is galling, I think, even beyond the politics of the issue, is the way we have seen some on the left contort scripture, contort faith to try to support abortion. In fact, President Biden, after Lindsey Graham put forward a bill on this matter that did include exceptions to a national abortion ban after, I believe it was 15, 20 weeks, but there were exceptions included. Joe Biden came out and said this: "I happen to be a practicing Roman Catholic. My church doesn't even make that argument now." Okay, I'm a Southern Baptist girl. However, I went to all-girls Catholic school, and apparently I know catechism better than our Catholic president. Because Catholic catechism says this: "Since the first century, the church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. This teaching has not changed. It remains unchangeable. Direct abortion, that is to say, abortion willed either as an end or a means, is gravely contrary to the moral law." And then there's the science of the matter, which the Democrat gubernatorial nominee down in Georgia doesn't seem to get. Her name is Stacey Abrams. She came out with this: "Wow, there's no such thing as a heartbeat at 6 weeks. It is a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body." Okay, I went to a 5-week appointment. I heard the heartbeat. I saw the heartbeat. There indeed was a heartbeat. It wasn't manufactured so that a man could take control of my body. That is a truly asinine thing to say, and it's contrary to all science. You can go read the March of Dimes, National Institute of Health, all of these scientific organizations which say indeed there is a heartbeat that is beating at 6 weeks. But what's fascinating is to watch the way the left falls in line. Stacey Abrams makes this comment around the same time. I think it was a few weeks before she made it. Planned Parenthood had changed their website to say that they used to say a heartbeat existed at that time. Now it doesn't say that. Stacey Abrams' name is trending on Twitter, and what does big tech do? What does Twitter do? Instead of writing a very bland description as to why a name trends, which is what they typically do, they wrote this. They wrote that doctors agree that a heartbeat doesn't exist in the early stage of pregnancy. So imagine you go on Twitter, you see Stacey Abrams trending, and social media has essentially advocated in changing the science, because a Democrat nominee makes a comment and the science, well, it all of a sudden changes. But in my home state of Florida and a few states across the nation, Governor Gavin Newsom of California, he's chosen to put up signs saying, if you can't get an abortion in your state, come to the state of California. But what's galling about these billboards that he's put up is he uses scripture on the billboards, on some of them. And he quotes Mark 12:31, "Love your neighbor as yourself. There's no greater commandment than these." As if that justifies abortion. I hate to tell you, Gavin, but there's no closer neighbor than this little boy in my stomach right now. It's pretty close, so good try. Look, we've got to return to a time where we see life the way that God sees life. And Scripture, I will tell you, I don't have to tell you, most of you know this, is unmistakably clear. It's remarkable the way the Bible is so applicable to so many issues in modern days here. But I would argue that on no issue is it more clear than on the issue of life. Luke 12:7, "Indeed, the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Do not be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows." Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." How amazing is that? Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That is how special each and every child is to God. You look at the issue of liberty, though. Not only are we winning on life, we're winning on the issue of liberty. COVID-19 was an interesting thing because it really showed us which governors were autocratic, which governors were really despotic in the way they acted, and which governors believed in freedom. Governor Abbott, Governor DeSantis chose one way. Governor Newsom, Governor, when he was there, Cuomo, chose another way. Very different ways, right? And for a long time, the Supreme Court was dealing huge blows to religious liberty. For a long time, we were losing on these really key cases. For instance, there was a case brought against Governor Gavin Newsom. He wanted to close houses of worship, and they were subject to restrictions that secular businesses were not. Meanwhile, I had a boss who, I'll never forget the day he called me into the Oval and said, "Kayleigh, we're going to go to the podium. We're going to announce that houses of worship are essential and that their doors will be open this Sunday." Big deal. 'Cause 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 Well, just 1 week after President Trump did that, Gavin Newsom said, no, we're still going to restrict houses of worship. Goes to the Supreme Court, we lose. Justice Kavanaugh, he writes this in dissent. The basic constitutional problem is that comparable secular businesses are not subject to a 25% occupancy cap, including factories, offices, supermarkets, restaurants, retail stores, pharmacies, shopping malls, pet grooming shops, bookstores, florists, hair salons, and cannabis dispensaries. So open the cannabis dispensary, close the church, right? Because that's surely what our founding fathers intended. Then a lawsuit is brought against the state of Nevada. Same thing, house of worship restrictions. Lose at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upholds Nevada's Orwellian restrictions. And Alito writes this, the Constitution guarantees the free exercise of religion. It says nothing about the freedom to play craps or blackjack, to feed tokens into a slot machine, or to engage in any other game of chance. But the governor of Nevada apparently has different priorities. You're seeing a trend. We lose, we lose, we lose. California, Nevada, and then something happens. Amy Coney Barrett gets nominated for the Supreme Court. I was there in the Rose Garden when the nomination happened. She gets confirmed. And what happens at the Supreme Court? All of a sudden, we have a court that respects the First Amendment, that respects the freedom to practice your religion. A church and a synagogue together brought a case against then Governor Andrew Cuomo. This time, however, with Amy Coney Barrett on the court, we win. The First Amendment wins. And here's what Justice Gorsuch wrote. He has such a way with words. It turns out that the businesses that the governor considers essential include hardware stores, acupuncturists, and liquor stores, bicycle repair shops, certain signage companies, accountants, lawyers, and insurance agents. They're all essential too. So at least according to the governor, it may be unsafe to go to church, but it is always fine to pick up another bottle of wine, to shop for a new bike, or spend the afternoon exploring your distal points and meridians. Who knew public health would so perfectly align with secular convenience? It struck down New York's restrictions. A church brings a case again in California. They're struck down on the issue of religious freedom. Not just once, not just twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but California has been struck down 5 times since Amy Coney Barrett joined the court. And in fact, the most recent case they were struck down on with religious liberty was Tandem v. Newsom, where, get this, the government was trying to go into the home of men and women of faith and tell you how many people could gather for private prayer in your home. Think about that. But thankfully, we now have a Supreme Court that respects the Constitution. And here's the good news. Not only are we winning on these 2 issues, I think as a conservative movement, we're winning more broadly. You know, for a while, the headlines over the summer were about Joe Biden. They were, "The Phoenix is rising." That was one of the headlines. The New York Times called him Aviator Joe. He was the comeback kid, we were told. Well, not so quick. Reuters said 22% of voters think the country's on the right track. New York Times Siena polls showed that just 64% of Democrats, or I should say that big number, 64% of Democrats want a new candidate. And in fact, when you look at his competency polling by Politico, listen to this. This is how many people disagree with these adjectives to describe our president. 58% disagree he's energetic. 57% disagree he's a strong leader. 56% disagree he's a clear communicator. 53% disagree that he keeps his promises. 51% disagree he's capable of leading the country. Or there's the simple way to say it, the way my dad says it, which is just he's a lost ball in tall grass. My dad always says it best. People see what's happening in our government. They see what's happening in our media. In fact, Gallup found that the media is at its lowest rate of trust on record since the poll has been taken. Edelman Trust Barometer, Axios publishes this poll from them every January, and this was pretty astonishing because it's hard to get 67% of people to agree on anything, but 67% said that journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or know are grossly exaggerated. The American people have woken up. They've seen who our president is. They've seen who our media is. And that brings us to the midterms. We've got a pretty exciting day coming up 2 weeks from Tuesday. Even Jen Psaki, who's no longer with the administration, so now she's free to say what she wants. She says, if it is a referendum on the president, Democrats will lose, and they know that. They know they have a rough day coming up 2 weeks from Tuesday. And on my way here, or actually it was yesterday I saw this, a New York Times editorial board member had this headline: Democrats should be freaking out a little about South Texas. Now, this is in the New York Times. I mean, probably as far left as you can get. Democrats would be wise to start freaking out a little more about the Republican Party's growing focus on local races in its quest to transform the political landscape of South Texas. Voting blue in these parts isn't so much a political decision as a way of life. Texas Republicans are fired up to change that. The party was thrilled when Donald Trump made a strong showing across South Texas in 2020. National Review noting that 5 of the 6 largest county-level Democrat to Republican shifts from 2016 to 2020 happened right here in South Texas. The politics of South Texas, they are changing to reflect the people. And it's because of the Latino community who is saying, we've had enough. And they said it here in Texas, the Latino community has said it in my home state of Florida, where if you look at what's happening in Miami-Dade, county that is heavily Latino, it's transformed. In fact, President Trump, he got the highest numbers in Miami-Dade County of any Republican nominee in 16 years. The headline coming out of Florida is DeSantis and Rubio hold strong leads to Florida's gubernatorial and Senate races. They are up by double digits with Latinos. And the left loves to say, oh, well, that's just Texas and that's just Florida. This isn't happening nationwide. Newsflash, there's a Senate race in Nevada. Guess who's winning? Guess who's winning? Adam Laxalt by 1.8%. And Newsweek has this headline: why isn't the first Latina U.S. Senator, Cortez Masto, she's a Democrat incumbent, why isn't the first Latina U.S. Senator doing better with Latino voters? Well, I can tell you why. What's the message coming from the Democrat Party? Jill Biden came to Texas and analogized and compared Latino voters to breakfast tacos. You all remember that. Nancy Pelosi out with this quote. Talk about someone not being more elitist and out of touch. You can't get worse than Nancy Pelosi. She had this to say: we have a shortage of workers in our country, and you see even in Florida some of the farmers and the growers saying, why are you shipping these immigrants up north? We need them to pick the crops down here. Who's she talking to? As if anyone believes that Nancy Pelosi has gone out and talked to farmers in Florida. I don't think so. But this is the message coming out of the Democrat Party, and Latinos have woken up and said, no, this is not me. I want to be able to send my kid to a school and know that they're being taught education, not woke political ideology. You know, I believe in life, I believe in liberty, I believe in a secure but compassionate southern border. You can do both. We're at a crossroads in this country. We're at a very big crossroads when we send our kids to school, and the things they're being taught are unbelievable. There's a lawsuit out in California. Little girl, middle school girl, goes to school, was told that she should go to this equality club, didn't know what the term transgender meant, goes to the equality club, all of a sudden starts going by a different pronoun, by a different name. Her mom isn't informed of this until a year and a half later. And it's largely because of COVID that the mom even figured out what was going on with her daughter at school. It's happening in Florida, my home state. Same story, a young girl sent to a meeting, starts going by a different pronoun, starts going by a different name, but the parents say they didn't even know about this until she tried to commit suicide in the bathroom 2 times. This is what's happening in our nation's schools. And meanwhile, the very basic things that bind us together as an American people are being challenged, like the American flag. I never thought I'd see a day where a New York Times editorial board member said she was disturbed to see the American flag. Macy Gray called it tattered, divisive, and correct. And then there was an alternate for the Olympics who said she wanted to win a medal, not so she could put that medal around her neck and the flag around her shoulders, but so that she could burn the American flag on the podium. We're at a very important time in our country politically, but more than that, putting politics aside, and I'll just end with this, I think the most important thing that we need to do in this room is, yes, share your conservative values, but as people of faith, we need to share our faith with others because we need a turning point in this country. We need a revival where we return to our churches, where we return to the values that make this country, I believe, the greatest on earth. And for me, you know, I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh, and that was great. I got my political ideology riding in my dad's truck and listening to this man. But more important than that, you know, I learned about faith in the pews of my Southern Baptist church and at my all-girls Catholic school. And one day when I was a teenager, or before I was a teenager, I walked down the aisle of my Southern Baptist church and I gave my life to Christ. And I believe I became a Christian that day. But I will tell you this, my faith went from my head to my heart in a very powerful way after college. You know, I graduated from Georgetown University, I moved to Manhattan, I go to this church called the Journey Church, and while I'm there, my pastor says that Manhattan can be full of millions of people, but it can be the loneliest place on earth. And I found that to be the case. And I remember feeling so lonely, and one day I left work early, and I just was feeling bad. I was going through a bad breakup at the time. Go back to my apartment. I tried calling my mom. She wasn't answering. I was trying to call anyone. No one was around. And so I said to God, I need to hear from you right now if you're out there. And all of a sudden, snap of the fingers, my phone lights up with a number I don't know. I answer the phone, and the first thing I hear is, this is the Journey Church. We feel like we need to pray for you. How can we pray for you? And it was an amazing moment in my life where my faith went from my head to my heart, where it has always been and will always remain. And it's pretty cool, I will say, to get a call from the President of the United States asking you to be his press secretary. But what is more meaningful is to get a call from the Almighty God through one of his servants here on earth, who I don't even remember if it was a male or a female that called me, but that call changed my life. And the reason I share this with you is, you know, this is a little bit about my journey and my faith walk and who I am. And I told you, I began by saying that God put me in a place for such a time as this, but that is something for all of us. If you're here, whatever you're going through, whatever your life circumstance, you are here for a reason, for a purpose, and he has a plan for your life. In the same way he used whoever that person was, I wish I knew who it was to call my phone, that person was used for such a time as this. And each of you in this room, we live in really scary times. My mom used to say, the country's changing, the world's changing. And I used to say, you're crazy, Mom, and she's exactly right. The country is changing, the world is changing. And it's all the more reason that we, as men and women of faith, need to stand up and be bold and share what is the truth. Because all of us in this room are here for such a time as this. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I think we have a few, okay, we're good. Thank you so much.
If y'all have the envelopes for the...
Sorry, that was because of me.
Can y'all hear me? There we go. Sorry. I'm not a pro like she is. If y'all have the envelopes for the donations, the table in the back will take them. We missed our intermission with that great speech. But that's not a problem because that's exactly what we're here for, is to educate the youth and get them inspired. So... If anyone has worked up an appetite so far, there is a food truck outside, so I know how good this South Texas food is. All right, if y'all could start finding your way back to your seats, we're going to get started here shortly. So I know there's a little bit of a line out there near the food truck. If you happen to have a friend that's in line on the food truck, tell them that we're starting shortly. And one of the tables in the back has a t-shirt that looks like this for the pro-life movement. It's free to youth and a $10 donation for the adults. So if y'all are interested in one of the shirts, the table, I think, right back to my left has them. So if y'all will get your seats, we've got our next speaker ready to come out. So for our next speaker, Mina Kim, she's the president of Base News Network and with 34% news. So I'll bring her out right now. Here she is. And she'll tell you how she delivers U.S. news to the Korean community.
Hi, thank you, Christian and Texas Youth Summit, for this great opportunity to speak at this amazing event. So let me start by this. America is a free country. America has protected freedoms of many countries around the world. America has always been a beacon of hope and liberty for this world. But as we all know, now the core values which have kept America are in crisis, which will have ramifications for freedom in the rest of the world. My name is Mina Kim. I'm an independent journalist from South Korea with a large following of Korean and Korean American conservatives. Many of you may wonder why I'm here speaking today in front of you during this critical season when you are about to vote for the leaders of your community. Well, it is because so many people back in my own country and around the world are paying close attention to what is happening in America. And I want to share with you the views of from overseas looking at America in this critical election season. We believe that this midterm election is a very important election because the result of it could bring bring the change and change the dynamic of what is going on in America, and also could have consequences for the rest of the world. So the reason for this is that America we know, is a country with deep roots and unshakable values. The value of true liberty that comes from morals, which comes from true religion, and the value of limited government, where individual rights are protected against government intrusion, and the value of true Christianity, value of family, and many more. So throughout history, these great values of America were spread out and exported to many nations fighting for freedom, including us, South Korea, when we were fighting against our communist opponents, which now has become North Korea. We could save our land thanks to the thousands of soldiers, US soldiers who fought for us. And because of that, we were able to build a free nation led by our own founding father, who had been greatly and deeply influenced by the founding fathers of America and your Constitution. Throughout history, America has been exporting these great founding values shaped by biblical truth to many different nations, helping them preserve the true freedom of their country. However, things have shifted in a completely different direction in recent years. And to realize that, let me ask you a few questions now. It's a yes or no question, so if you could help me. So question number one, are the soaring prices of gas and groceries a problem? Thank you. Is the pushing of radical ideologies in schools a problem? And is illegal immigration a problem? Yes, and my last question is, has the Biden administration done anything to help everyday Americans solve and overcome these issues? No. Right. With the current US administration practicing woke and progressive policies, we have been seeing the US economy decline, causing prices of many things that we consume daily to soar up to record highs. And surprisingly, this also applies to Korea and other parts of the world. And I often hear people saying in the other parts of the world, Biden has exported us Bidenflation. Progressives in America, the left, also has become more imperialistic. They have sought to control every culture, religion, government, and value system. They have also told people they don't need morals to achieve true freedom. They also have been violently crushing any form of opposition through cancel culture, undermining the right to free speech. Furthermore, these poisonous ideologies of the left have influenced many different issues that have a direct impact on our lives, such as abortion, media control, climate control, media integrity, masking, vaccination, education, border control, gender identification, and economy. We should understand that this is inevitable because historically, in a nation or country run by progressive policies, we saw people entrapped in poverty, sparse resources, submission through control, and rights and freedom of people being taken away. And they use intimidating tactics to demoralize and silence others through terminology and acts of hatred. And the result of that is, on the cultural and social side, depression, fearfulness, and confusion. And on the economic side, it's record high inflation and food and gas prices, and many more. And other than declining economy, we have also seen an increasing number of illegal immigrants crossing US border, causing the security of the border area to become unstable. We have also seen schools pushing radical ideologies, causing younger generation to be forced to learn dangerous gender and victimhood values at school. And the craziest part, which we see from outside of the US, is of course the schools, teachers, counselors, and doctors are crossing the boundaries of the parents' rights. And yes, this notion is also being exported to other parts of the world, including us, South Korea. These notions created by the left are anti-Christian, anti-American, anti-life, and anti-family, and we need to stop them from spreading out to this nation and to the rest of the world. Let me tell you a little bit about Korea. We face the same struggle in my country. For the past 5 years, people in our country also have been struggling due to our so-called liberal left-wing political forces who have seriously undermined our founding values. Our latest leftist government used its positions to spread fake news and restricted freedom of expression of our people. They limited freedom of religion and worship under the pretext of safety during COVID. And they undermined traditional family values, forcing gender education on younger children and legalizing abortion. You guys all may know President Ronald Reagan's famous quote, freedom is only a generation away from extinction. We as South Koreans are living in that reality right now, which is why if we and our allies do not fight for freedom, we will slowly surrender our rights as free citizens to communist leftist powers. And for us, it's China and North Korea above us who are trying to roar like a lion, to intimidate and control us, and try to make us like them. And we don't want to be like them. So, we have discussed how America has been declining and the rest of the world has been repeating and following your steps. But the good news is, we still believe that true America we know is still strong and still has the influence and power across the globe that no one ever will be able to have. We believe that America has a special calling in this world to carry undying spirit of freedom based on the Word of God. This midterm election should be a fight to keep this great spirit of the United States against those who pursue to destroy it. So giving the Democrats a seat to do that will ultimately make all of us and our future generations suffer. So what do? We must fight by voting. Wake up and encourage your neighbors. Do your best to protect future generations by bringing godly educations back to schools. And this is the spirit of the United States that many nations also want back to be restored. Please don't stop fighting for America and freedom of this world. Your victory will present hope to those nations fighting for the same value, the value of unalienable rights of men given by the Creator, God, and that any government should be subject to the natural rights of individuals. Countries like Korea, Italy, and Netherlands are now rising again, inspired by you conservatives in America who are fighting and standing up for truth. You helped us and fought for us in the past, and now we will fight with you. Before I close, Ephesians chapter 6 in the Bible says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm." I believe that if we pray together and go forward with all our hearts with the armor of God on us, God will give us victory, and it starts with America. I don't speak Spanish that well, but on the way here, I saw an amazing sign from Mayra Flores' campaign sign. It said, "Por Dios, por la familia, y por la patria. Gracias, Dios los bendiga."
So our next speaker is from West Texas, which I'm sure is just as hot as here in South Texas. I'm from Sinton, Texas. It's a little north of here. And it was way hot there. So from Texas 19, Congressman Jody Arrington. He is the representative for the food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world. And here he is. Let's give him a warm South Texas round of applause.
Thank you, Colby. Good afternoon. Well, I am proud to represent the Lone Star State and the God-fearing, freedom-loving people here in the Rio Grande Valley and West Texas and urban centers and suburban areas of the greatest state in the Union. Can I get a witness? And I'm proud to represent the hardworking farmers, ranchers, and oil and gas producers, energy producers of all kinds who are giving our nation energy independence and food security, which is national security. And so I'm very proud of what my folks in West Texas do to contribute to the greatness of this country. And I'm proud to be their voice in our nation's capital. I want to thank the Mid-Valley Assembly Church for opening up their doors of this church home and this church community. This is Pastor Appreciation Month. And let's be clear. Ben Franklin was right when he said, only a virtuous people can preserve freedom. John Adams reiterated that point when he said, the Constitution is only good for a moral and religious people. So you can have all the right laws and you can have this great framework of freedom that we call the Constitution, and you could still have the moral decay that would be the demise of this or any nation. If God doesn't build this house, if the Lord doesn't rebuild what is broken and fallen down, the people will labor in vain. I can tell you that. I've been there for 6 years in Washington, and the answers are not in Washington. The answer is at Calvary. The answers are in the places of worship. And it's when the people of God are the salt and light, preserving righteousness and revealing truth, that this nation will prosper again. That's the bottom line. And quite frankly, it's the bottom line for me as an individual and for my family. And that's why I think it is super important and more than symbolic that we are holding this conference, this youth summit here at the church. I think that is the first principle. America's great, as the great French philosopher said after spending time here, 50 years into this experiment in liberty and democracy. He said, America's great because America is good. Now, that has been taken out of context on many of occasions by many politicians. But if you go read what Alexis de Tocqueville was saying in the context of that statement, he said, I've been to the halls of Congress. I've seen the great institutions of democracy and the great edifices of higher education. I've seen the commodious harbors, the great American economy. But it wasn't until I went into the churches and saw the pulpits aflamed with the righteousness of God. That's when I knew that America's great because America's good, and if it loses its goodness, it will lose its greatness. That's your first principle, young ladies and young men. And that is the first principle and the founding principle of this great nation that God has blessed. It was His favor and the faith of our founders, ultimately, that allowed us to be conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equally. So I'm thankful, Pastor Mario, and your team here for opening up this church and holding out the gospel as not just the flame of freedom, because you need virtue and freedom to go hand in hand, but more importantly, as the light of salvation of man, the salvation of the world, truth, hope. For heaven's sakes, if our hope is in politics or politicians, we are to be pitied among all men. So I'm thankful that this nation was founded on the hope of Christ and the Judeo-Christian values. And I'm grateful to be in this place with these young, budding leaders of the great state of Texas. And I can't thank Chris or Christian and his team and this righteous mission of trying to educate, engage, and empower the next generation of American leaders. That's what you are. And you have a great responsibility on your shoulders, and you have great challenges ahead of you. I know because I'm in the thick of it right now. This is your country. Ben Franklin left the Independence Hall where he was working to memorialize this country in the Constitution, and he said to a lady who accosted him outside of the building, the premises, and she said, "Did you give us a monarchy or did you give us a republic?" He said, "It's a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." That's the question for you all. If you can keep it. Because we can talk about American exceptionalism, we can talk about our heritage and our history, and we can espouse these glorious ideals that gave us this nation that is the greatest power, the generosity, prosperity that the world's ever known. But just talking about that and not having anyone to stand up, speak up, and fight for the preservation of those values, well, we'll lose the republic. We'll fail to keep it. And we will become a byword, as Ben Franklin said, to generations of Americans. And so we must keep it. But we must realize that just saying that in a vacuum and not living it and fighting for it and engaging the process. So I'm encouraged that we have young people that want to take charge of their destiny and ensure that they will have the same freedoms and opportunities that every generation of Americans have had. I think for me, simply put, the central ingredient of this great experiment in self-government, and by the way, it's not a great accident. It's called a great experiment because our founders were very intentional in how they drew up the architecture for this nation and the self-determination, a government of and by and for the people, the likes of which has never graced this planet. But I think at the heart of this experiment is freedom. It's freedom. And that's what's at stake. That is at the center of the epic battle for the heart and soul of your country, your future in this country. I believe, save and accept the love of God in Christ, that there isn't a greater force for good in all of human history than freedom. Freedom has unlocked and unleashed the human potential and the human spirit like nothing else. That's what America represents. Free people, unleashed to live out their God-given calling with their God-given talents. And as a result of that, our country has blessed generations with the greatest opportunities, the highest standard of living, and the best quality of life anywhere on the planet. Is that not America summarized? That's what's at stake. And that's what is being threatened by policies, by ideology, by lawlessness, by incompetence. Ronald Reagan said that freedom is only one generation away from extinction. If somebody hasn't quoted Ronald Reagan before I got up here, they have done you a disservice. And if they didn't quote that in the context of this youth summit and the theme of engaging and taking back this country and taking control of your destiny, then it's a disservice to you all. Think about it. Freedom and all of its blessings that I just articulated is never more than a generation away from extinction. He said it's not passed down in the bloodstream. You don't just get it because you were born in America. He said you get it because you work for it. You fight for it. And that's what you all have to do. That's what I have to do as a steward of where God's called me for such a time as this. It will be your time. And I'll pass the torch gladly along to you, I can assure you. But it is one generation away from extinction. President Lincoln said it best, and I share his sentiment, again, after 6 years of being in the fight, being in the arena. America is not going to see its demise on account of an existential threat or an enemy on the outside. Our risks and our threats to our freedom in the republic lie within our country. You've heard the statement, I've seen the enemy and the enemy's us. Do we need to take China seriously and other great power adversaries? You better believe it. Providing for a common defense is job one. Making sure our military is ready for the evolving threats of today and tomorrow, job one. But every great civilization, every great nation that came before us, they died on the vine and they decayed and degraded on account of the enemy from within. That's the more difficult and sinister aspect of preserving your freedom and keeping the republic, as Ben Franklin phrased it. You follow me? So, number one, the enemy of complacency, clearly on a Saturday to have young people here saying, I want to learn, I want to get in the arena, I want to roll up my sleeves, I want to engage my peers, I want to win hearts and minds for our common cause of liberty and limited government, and for those foundational principles, for my rights, for my opportunities. That's awesome. It's inspiring to me. Silence is to be complicit. I love the quote from Martin Luther King. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. I don't know who said it, but I quote it often. Evil prospers when good men and women stand on the sidelines and do nothing, and they say nothing. They let the voices of the radicals that would undermine this country, that would poison our children's minds, that would show disregard both to the rule of law and those who enforce the law in a way that would bring a very sinister kind of tyranny and anarchy. We've got to stand up and we've got to engage. And you all are here because you're leaders and because God may stir your heart like He stirred mine when I was a sophomore at Plainview High School. It was Ronald Reagan was president. I had a great teacher named Miss Becky Taylor, and I had a dad that threw his boot at the TV every night watching the news saying, what is the government doing to me and to my family, my community? A country's going to hell in a handbasket. I thought, wow, This tractor salesman in the middle of the Great Plains of Texas, in this dusty little farming town, was touched by a president, by politics, and the policies of the day. Politics matters, elections matter, and let me tell you something, policies have consequences. And if you don't know that by now, living in this country under the current administration and single-party Democrat rule, then you've been asleep. We are at ground zero here in the valley for Biden's self-inflicted, unabated border chaos. Doesn't have to be that way. We love the immigrant. We welcome. We're all immigrants in this great country. But we only welcome those who respect our laws, our sovereignty, and the safety of our citizens. Chaos is unacceptable. To cede our sovereignty to drug cartels who are poisoning our children, pouring their drugs, and killing our families, our family members, and our friends by the tens of thousands is unacceptable in a country as great as ours. So policies matter. And listen, it's not just the border chaos, it's the full whole of government assault on our energy independence. And Texas produces more of that freedom molecule than any other state in the union. It's every American, quite frankly, suffering under the disastrous economic policies, namely the cost of living that is just running completely away from working families on account of socialist spending that has ignited this firestorm. And you know who it hurts the most? Working people. These policies that they claim are going to help the vulnerable, the poor, the economically disadvantaged, like defund the police. Who do you think needs the police more to protect their homes and their neighborhoods? It's the poorer people. It's the working people. It's minority communities. Same holds true about this regressive tax called inflation. So folks, it matters. So stay engaged. Don't be complicit. Understand that in God we trust, and the fact that our founders understood that we have to have a sense of accountability and a higher calling than just to the Constitution and the laws if this is going to work. Remember this, the threats inside that I've seen may not be obvious to everybody. But when you weaponize the institutions of democracy like I've seen, and shame on anybody, Republican or Democrat, that tries to seize the levers of power and use them to persecute their political opponents. I don't care if it's the IRS or the FBI or the first partisan impeachment ever or the first impeachment of a non-sitting president ever. We go down that road, it's mutually assured destruction, and we won't govern this country, and our children will fail to eat the sweet fruit of liberty. It is the Marxist identity politics that tries to put you in a category and me in a category and define you and define me and break our society down into all of these classes and races, and they pit us against each other. That's not leadership. Our motto is out of many one. We are a nation of immigrants, but we all came fleeing from persecution, fleeing from a situation that was less than ideal for hope and future of economic freedom, of individual freedom, and the protection of our rights. And we found that in the land of promise, in the land of dreams called the United States of America. And I believe this identity politics is a way to divide us, and it will ultimately destroy us if we let it. Out of many, one American, one set of ideals, one pledge of allegiance, one great nation under God. Folks, I could go on, but just be aware that while there are threats that you will hear about and read about on the news, such as China or Ukraine and what's happening in Eastern Europe. And quite frankly, the bigger threat in Eastern Europe is that they decided to implement an extreme set of climate policies that have made them now a slave to a petro-tyrant in Vladimir Putin. I hope we watch that movie and we see that it ends badly, and that we decide that we can steward God's great earth, that we can steward our environment. We can have cleaner air and water, and we can still grow our economy and support a great military and protect our freedom, our values, and interests around the world. We've always been able to do that because we're Americans. Look, it's an honor to be with you. It's inspirational to know that there are young people that are engaged, and your turn will come where you will take upon your shoulders the leadership mantle of the greatest country in the history of the world. And my commitment to you is to fight. It's to fight so that those organizing principles in the Constitution and those core values that our nation was founded on will be well intact, firmly established for you. And let me leave you with this last, probably unexpected point with respect to the threats of governing a great country. I don't think you've heard me tear down a single person who didn't share my views. I will fight against the forces that want to assault and tear asunder those values that I articulated. I will fight tooth and nail with every fiber of my being socialism and other ideologies and policies that will threaten your future. But let me tell you something. But we can do it and have civil political discourse. We can do it and love our neighbor. We can do it with the love of God in our hearts, being happy warriors for the things that we love and are fighting for, instead of hyperventilating about the squad or Nancy Pelosi. I mean, we can waste so much time on people instead of exalting those things that made this country what it is, that gave people something in their hearts of hope, that they were willing to risk their lives and die in the desert to come here. So I'm not saying we don't fight hard, and I'm not saying we don't debate in the most robust and vigorous ways, and I'm not saying we don't hold people accountable and to the highest standards. But we can do it loving our fellow American, loving God and the blessings that He's bestowed upon us as Americans. And we can do it because we're fighting for something so much bigger than personalities. Amen? So, church, thank you. Pray hard for this country. Young people, rise up. Lay hold of this country. It's yours. Fight hard for it. Fight the right way. And God will bless us. He will bless us. And we will see better days and even our best days if we do all those things and do them faithfully. And I'm grateful that I could spend some time with you today. God bless, and go Texas. Sorry,
It's representatives like this that remind me how lucky we are to have representation in the United States like that. As much stuff as we see in the media, events like this really highlight how we're not as bad off as we are, and if we think we are, we have the ability to change it. So next up from the Daily Caller, I have Mr. Ventura. So if you're ready to come out, sir.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I really want to thank Christian Collins for inviting me here today. My name is Jorge Ventura. I'm a reporter with the Daily Caller. And the past year and a half, I had a very unique experience of being able to be on the front lines covering the ongoing humanitarian crisis at our southern border, especially here in South Texas that's becoming a key issue here with the midterms. Being in media and reporting on the front lines, you have a huge responsibility to communicate that story with the American people so they could get a true grasp of what's going on. The question that I always get from people is, well, what changed in terms of immigration policy from the Trump administration to the Biden administration? And the answer is actually quite simple. The word is deterrence. So under the Trump administration, the Remain in Mexico policy was key in stopping these huge wave of illegal immigration coming into the country. Before Trump actually came into office, migrants crossing illegally into the U.S. and were looking to seek asylum basically could come into the country illegally, and the Obama administration would then do what they call the catch and release, which they would release that migrant inside the United States with a future court date. And for folks who don't know, it's only about 14% of the time that migrant even comes back to that court case. So essentially, they got to break the rule, and we just let them go. But under the Trump administration, that Remain in Mexico policy was really key in stopping migrants. And the reason why it was key, because for example, if you're a migrant from Honduras, the risk wasn't worth it anymore because you still had to do the dangerous journey to the southern border, putting your hands in human smugglers and cartels, only to cross illegally, and then for Trump to tell you, well, you have to remain in Mexico until that court case. So that was a huge step in stopping the wave of illegal immigration. When Joe Biden and Kamala Harris hit the campaign trail in 2020, they said numerous times that the administration would be the more humane administration. They would not deport migrants looking to seek asylum inside the United States. Now, this was essentially music to the ears of human smugglers and cartels because that was their new selling point, and they communicated this en masse to migrants from all over Central America and to South America. The human smugglers actually were so bold in the communication. A lot of the organizations for some of the caravans you guys see coming to their southern border are actually happening on Facebook, and they even do QR codes. So if you do a QR code, you could register and you could be human smuggled to the United States in under 30 days. For folks who don't know, I'm a field reporter, and I never covered the border. 2020, I focused on riots, and then the beginning of the year, I focused on Hispanics who lost their business during the business shutdown. But around March of last year is when that first term border crisis started coming on the news. And I was watching mainstream media coverage of the border, and they only covered the border for the first week of the border crisis. And after that, they all returned to Washington, D.C. So I said, hold on, let me get on the ground and let's see what's going on. There's got to be more to this story. It's definitely not a seasonal uptick as what the mainstream media called it. So I arrived at McAllen Airport for my first time ever in South Texas. It was last year in March, and from there we headed to La Jolla. And when we arrived in La Jolla, I was shocked because as soon as we arrived into La Jolla, we ran into a group of 350 migrants. At that time, that was huge. I mean, compared to what the groups we're seeing now, that's not that big, but that was huge. And at that time, this group was coming strictly from Central America. So the border crisis was so early. We didn't have the Haitian, the Cuban, and the Venezuelan wave yet. We didn't even know that was going to come. And I was a bit shocked running into this group from Central America. I started interviewing them, started filming everything. We started documenting. And what immediately caught my attention and started to catch my audience attention was that the migrants were looking to turn themselves into Border Patrol. We were so used to, seeing those videos and images where migrants come into the country illegally. They see a Border Patrol agent or law enforcement, and they try to evade, they try to get away. And this is one of the rare times where migrants will come into the country illegally, but then look to actually turn themselves into Border Patrol, which was very, very fascinating. And the reason why they wanted to turn themselves into Border Patrol is because even early on, the migrants knew they faced little to no chance of deportation. And they so far were actually right about this system. And as the images and videos started coming out of hundreds of thousands of migrants from Central America flooding our border and overwhelming Border Patrol officials here on the American side, early on we caught on, we started being one of the first media outlets to start reporting on the tactics used by human smugglers and cartels. Essentially, these migrants were just big pawns in a bigger system. What the human smugglers and cartels started to do with their operation is they would get a group of about 300, 350 migrants, and they would place them in areas around the border. One of the first areas that was actually being hit was McAllen and La Jolla. So they would put these massive groups of migrants in La Jolla, in McAllen, and by doing this, on the U.S. side, this would overwhelm Border Patrol officials. So if you're a Border Patrol agent, you run into a group of 300 people, it's a lot of work because you have to call in extra agents, you have to process, and a lot of the adults that are coming in, the children that they're with, they're actually not the parents of those children. They're just bringing them in so they could get released inside the United States. So Border Patrol has to do a ton of work just for a group of 300. And in doing this, they also have to call local law enforcement and get backup. So essentially, this tactic worked great for the cartels because overwhelming Border Patrol officials and the local law enforcement on the American side basically created holes and gaps throughout the border. So this is where we started to see lots of drugs coming into the country. So fentanyl started coming in the country record numbers. The other thing that's pretty scary is the gotaways. So for folks who don't know the term gotaway, maybe heard in the news, gotaway are individuals that come into the country illegally, and Border Patrol is able to detect with some type of technology, with a camera or anything, but since they didn't have the manpower there, they couldn't apprehend that individual. So gotaways, the fiscal year just actually ended, but for gotaways, guys, we're actually, in this last fiscal year, 900,000 gotaways are in the country. So essentially close to 1 million people are in the country illegally and undetected. The reason why that number is scary, because a gotaway, unlike these family units, like I said earlier, these family units want to turn themselves in. The gotaways don't want to turn themselves in because either they're bringing drugs in the country, they have a past criminal record inside the United States, or they have some type of cartel connection coming inside the United States. So that is what we started to notice early, was these tactics used by human smugglers and how these migrants were essentially these pawns for these cartels. One of the stories that always stand out for me is we went to Roma, Texas, and it's the middle of the night. It'll be hitting like 1 in the morning. And on the Mexican side, you start to see these little rafts come in. And these rafts would be human smugglers bringing in children and adults, and it would be nonstop. And we would sit there documenting everything. And we would even do interviews with the human smugglers. I mean, the human smugglers were so bold that they didn't care that they were being on camera. They knew that they wouldn't be caught. And in doing that, I actually spoke to a human smuggler. I said, is this easier under the Biden administration than the Trump administration? I mean, and he just blatantly said, oh, it's way easier. There's more people to bring in. And the eerie part was he said there's more kids now. And when we were in Roma, Texas, as we're documenting these kids basically being dropped off on these riverbanks, and we started to notice that the adults of these kids were not the parents. The way they grabbed them, manhandled them, it was very eerie. And one thing that we noticed in the Roma, Texas part is if you look at the migrant kids, if you look at the kids being brought in and the adults, they all had different color wristbands. And when we started to do more reporting and research, we found out that essentially these migrants had to pay off the cartel in order to be taken across that river. So any migrant or any kid who didn't have a color wristband didn't pay that fee. So essentially what you were seeing is you were seeing humans being used almost as products, almost like they were used as Amazon products with a literally shipping label on them. I mean, it had everything. And on the color wristbands, it says the word in Spanish, it says entregas, which means basically delivered. And, I'm interviewing these kids and I'm saying, you came here by yourself from El Salvador, Honduras, and we couldn't believe that this kind of, in the middle of the night, this human smuggling operation was happening and nothing was happening. I mean, there was no stoppage. The human smugglers were so bold to even talk to us, and they were dropping off kids and kids by the hundreds. And so for us as the reporting aspect, we were fascinated by Roma. We said we have to keep going. In doing research before actually going again to Roma, I read actually a pretty interesting article from the media company Axios. For folks who don't know Axios, they're mainstream media, not right-wing outlet at all. But Axios actually did an investigation on the unaccompanied minors. And I want everyone to think about this number I'm about to say. So according to Axios, 1 out of 3 unaccompanied children that get released inside the United States, the government can't even track the sponsor anymore. So the government is losing kids inside the system. And we said, wow, 1 out of 3, that's high. I mean, even if the report said 1 out of 10 kids went missing, that's already at 10% rate. So we're already at 1 out of 3. This was coming out of Axios. So we go back to Roma. We continue reporting on these kids that are just being smuggled in the middle of the night, the color wristbands. And we were doing a report where we were just interviewing unaccompanied migrant children to get their stories. And I remember I was interviewing 2 brothers and a sister. I believe the sister was 8 years old, then the brother was 10, and the other one was 12. And as I'm interviewing these 3 kids, that article just popped in my head, 1 out of 3. And I'm like, wait a minute. These siblings have no idea that one of them is going to get released to a sponsor, and then they're going to get lost inside the system, and the government is going to lose track of. It was pretty heartbreaking. And in reporting on this humanitarian crisis, we said, well, what happens to a lot of these kids or teenagers that get released inside the United States, right? What happens after that? And I'm really thankful for Congressman Mike Garcia. He's out of California. he gave us some tips on some investigations to follow. So a lot of these kids, especially the teenager migrant kids that get released to vetted sponsors, even though the government can't fully vet them, they're actually getting involved in what we call labor trafficking. So they're actually finding a lot of these kids working on labor farms across the country. We actually did, myself and my producer, Sagnik Basu, we did 2 full-on investigations, documentaries into what happens with some of these kids. Now, our documentaries were based in Southern California. So a lot of these migrant kids, teenagers that get released inside the United States, the cartel moves them into Southern California, then moves them into Northern California. And the reason they move them to California is because they have these kids work on what they call illegal marijuana operations. I'm not sure if you guys know about this, but in California, cartels have essentially taken over North and South through these huge, massive illegal marijuana operations and water theft. So we started beginning our investigation, and we start finding that these kids are being forced to work on these illegal grows. We ended up interviewing a man named Brian Suits in Lancaster, California. And what Brian told me that, one day, it's around 4 in the morning, he's hearing all this noise outside. He says, what's going on? He goes outside and he finds these 3 15-year-old Honduran teenagers stealing water from his pipelines. And out there in the deserts, it's rural, so it's a lot of farmers. They're stealing water. And, so Brian approaches these kids and call the cops and finds out that these kids were stealing water from Brian because the cartel made them essentially order them to steal that water and then bring that water back to the illegal marijuana operations. As everyone knows, marijuana needs water to grow. So these kids were being ordered to steal water from Americans in the middle of the night and then bring them back to an illegal marijuana operation where they were basically being labor trafficked. I mean, this was eye-opening stuff, so we started investigating that and looking into it. And it's a really, what happens at the border, but I think a lot of people forget, they think that it never impacts them, right? You always hear that in other states it doesn't impact. Well, here we saw that these kids who are being smuggled were being forced to work on these illegal grows in California, nowhere near the border. Then this also still ties to the fentanyl crisis that we're seeing. So because so much manpower is being focused on these areas, like I said, with these big migrant groups, a lot of that fentanyl is coming in. So some of the states right now that are most impacted by fentanyl are actually white working class communities. You might not have heard that because usually mainstream media likes to ignore any issues impacting white working class. So states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and the number 1 state right now impacted by fentanyl is actually the state of Ohio. In Ohio, the fentanyl is actually so bad that there's kids growing up without parents, and that the orphanages and the shelters are actually running out of room where to put these kids. So it's something where you might be saying, well, I might not be living next to the border. Well, it's still impacting you there. We're seeing it with the fentanyl right now. The leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 is the opioid crisis. As we continue covering the border, we focused on La Jolla, we focused on McAllen, we started focusing on Del Rio, Eagle Pass, even taking us to Yuma, Arizona. And in covering this, we continued to tell the story of the unaccompanied minors reaching the border. About a month and a half ago, my team and I were in Yuma, Arizona, reporting. And the reason why Yuma is one of the more fascinating human smuggling routes is because Yuma, migrants from 100 different countries are smuggled into Yuma. So we meet migrants from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Russia, all the way to Peru, Brazil, Cuba. So really all over the world coming through Yuma. So as we were reporting in Yuma, we actually interviewed these 2 Honduran women who had this 8-year-old boy in their hands who was completely passed out. I mean, the 8-year-old boy looked like he was just in bad health, bad condition. And these Honduran migrants expressed to us, they said, hey, on our way into Yuma, Arizona, we stopped in Mexicali. Mexicali is about an hour out of Yuma. And they said that this little boy, 8-year-old from Honduras, was abandoned by a human smuggler. And they said that they found this 8-year-old boy actually naked. Like he didn't even have clothes. They just left him in the dirt. So these 2 women who were already coming to the U.S. pick up this little boy, give him clothes, and then bring him into Yuma where we were. And we go up to this little boy, and he was completely passed out. And this is a true story, and this is what happens every single day and night. We just happen to be there with cameras to document it, of unaccompanied minors reaching the border. And luckily for this little boy, if it wasn't for those 2 Honduran women, he would have been abandoned in Mexicali. I mean, who knows what would have happened to him. So we go up to the little boy, and we roll up his sleeves. Both of his sleeves, he actually had phone numbers on them. So he had both phone numbers with a family member back in Honduras. The women then turned that boy into Border Patrol, and that image went viral all over Twitter because for the first time, Americans are getting to really see the true human cost of the border crisis. And the thing is, it's sad to say, but for that little boy, he's extremely lucky that those migrant women found him, because there are hundreds of thousands of kids who don't even get to reach the southern border, who are abandoned, kidnapped, assaulted on their way up. Since Biden and Harris have come into office, 250,000 unaccompanied minors have reached the border. I got to say that number again, 250,000 unaccompanied minors are reaching the border. What this is also causing on the U.S. side is it's overflowing our facilities. So these children, even when we place them in facilities here in the United States, they're in overcrowded facilities in horrible conditions. Horrible conditions. We actually got a Congressman, Brian Babin, actually of Texas. I'm really grateful for Congressman Brian Babin. Last year, he actually leaked us some photos to us at Daily Caller about the conditions of what these kids were going through. And what we saw in these photos were jaw-dropping. I mean, these little pods in these facilities are only made for 30 people, and they were stacking 600 people on top of each other. Migrant children on top of each other. And then there were reports of migrant children being sexually assaulted and raped, and they can't speak the language, and they have no one to help them or represent them. And this is happening in our facilities run by the U.S. government. And to make matters worse, because we have so many migrants coming, not only the children, it overflows facilities, meaning the government has to rush when they do things. So one of the things the government is rushing in is they're rushing in and hiring unskilled and untrained case managers of these migrant children. So these case managers are essentially supposed to be responsible for these unaccompanied children who get released to vetted sponsors inside the United States. Well, these case managers, because they are not trained for that job, are not doing a good job on following up on these unaccompanied minors, and then we're literally losing them inside the United States. So that right now is continuing to happen day and night. It's something that actually doesn't get talked about in the media enough. So I really want to highlight what's happening with the unaccompanied minors. It's not normal, which it should not be okay. First of all, the record numbers that are reaching here, and then we're mass releasing them to sponsors we can't even vet out. Not sure if you guys seen the viral story about a month and a half ago, where a little girl was actually raped by her mother's boyfriend. That was I believe it was in Ohio. Same thing, was released to supposedly vetted sponsor. It was unvetted. The humanitarian crisis, and the reason why I say humanitarian is because Americans, when they think of the word humanitarian, they always think, oh, well, that happens in Africa, that happens in Yemen. It doesn't happen in the U.S. It's literally happened here every single day. Fiscal year of 2022 just ended, but over 700 migrant deaths happened in this last fiscal year. That's actually a record number. Could you imagine over 700 migrant deaths under a Trump administration, what the media coverage would look like? You would have CNN and Don Lemon literally living at the border. You would have The View would be doing their show from McAllen instead of Hollywood, if that was the case. And we actually got to see a lot of that, unfortunately. My team and I, we have done a lot of reporting. We just left from doing a story in Eagle Pass, Texas. And for folks who don't know, Eagle Pass, Texas is the deadliest crossing point throughout the whole southern border. What makes Eagle Pass the deadliest crossing point is because migrants are crossing the Rio Grande and are drowning, are being swept away from the currents. One thing that I try to tell people is the waters there are very, very deceptive. So if you're there at the border, you look at the waters, it looks like an easy swim. As soon as you jump in there, that water takes people. It sweeps grown men. My team and I have gone in the water to feel the currents, to basically report on what the migrants are going through, and it's powerful stuff. And the drownings there, that's another thing. We were interviewing actually Maverick County. We spoke into their local officials down there. What Maverick County has told us is that before Biden and Harris came in, they were averaging between 1 to 2 drownings per year. Now with the Biden and Harris administration, they're actually averaging 1 to 2 drownings per day. The Eagle Pass fire chief down there, they were making about 1 or 2 rescues per year. They're at 1 or 2 rescues per day. There was a day in September in Eagle Pass, they actually had 6 drownings in one day. Our team was recently down there about 3 weeks ago. We were there to do a story on that Eagle Pass is actually having so many drownings that they actually don't have any room to put the dead bodies in. Like the cemeteries have run out of room. If you guys actually go to Eagle Pass right now and visit the cemetery, the local cemetery, you'll notice 50 kind of makeshift crosses in this piping, and you'll see the names John Doe and Jane Doe, because a lot of these migrants who are drowning, we can't even get an ID on them. And Maverick County has to basically pull the bodies out, and literally bury them in their cemetery. And when we were actually there to do the report on the cemetery situation, we noticed that a lot of the crosses there had the name Baby John Doe. Baby John Doe. And when we spoke to Maverick County officials, they said, well, we're also having infants drown here that we literally can ID. The drownings are getting so bad that the Maverick County Sheriff actually had to call in the state of Texas and then order refrigerated trailers to put the bodies in. I mean, that is the real humanitarian situation going on. And when I speak with these officials, they don't know what to do next. They're running out of space to put the bodies. They're seeing drownings every single day. The sheriff also mentions to me that because his men and women are having to pull the dead bodies out every single day, his sheriffs are developing PTSD. On one of our last reports, while we were reporting on Eagle Pass, a drowning occurred of a Honduran man, and our drone man right there, who's actually here, Thomas Cooper, was able to film that drowning. And we reported on it. And when we interviewed the sheriff had actually already had that body stored in the trailer, and he said, this is every day for us now. It's essentially the new normal. It's not odd anymore. But that's just the reality, and that's just a story of many of what's going on the southern border. And I just want to share a little bit of it because I know a lot of people in politics, commentators, they speak about the border crisis, but not many of them got to see it, feel it, hear from the residents. And I've had the unique perspective of being in Mexico, following these migrant groups, being on the Texas side, interviewing a lot of these migrants. It's a true sad humanitarian crisis that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have yet to come down and visit. There is also no urgency from this administration. And what's interesting from a political standpoint is they're actually starting to see that political blowback from their voters here in South Texas. We saw that with Mayra Flores' win. We have Cassy Garcia, Monica de la Cruz running. And you're seeing voters here who have been loyal, if you want to use that word, but have been overwhelmingly in support of the Democratic Party, especially here in South Texas, start to, in a way, kind of wake up and start to shift their priorities as they see that the Democratic Party left them. So it's been interesting for me as a reporter to see all these developments happening in real time, especially the issue with the children. But being down there, one big thing you always kind of take away too is that the Mexican president is not feeling any pressure from this administration at all to solve the issue. So when we're in Mexico, the Mexican state police is actually letting these migrant groups flow in. And I want to mention this key part because this has kind of been going underreported. What people don't know is when migrants are in, let's say, Guatemala and they cross illegally into Mexico, the first border town they reach is called Tapachula, Mexico. From Tapachula, migrants are actually are not allowed legally, actually, to travel through Mexico because they're in Mexico illegally. What the Mexican officials have done is they grant these migrants these 30-day humanitarian visa cards. Basically, it's a fake humanitarian visa. And what the Mexican officials do is they give these migrants 30-day, basically it's a 30-day free pass card saying, hey, you have 30 days, you could travel through Mexico and then cross into the country illegally. Like basically, you have 30 days, just get out of here and get into the U.S. So one thing that isn't talked about is the Mexican government playing a massive role in the migration crisis by literally giving these fake humanitarian visas. And we see this by reporting on the border. These visas will be discarded all around. So it's something that I really want people to know about. It's not talked about in media, the role that Mexican state government is playing in our humanitarian crisis. The fiscal year, I'm gonna end it here, then if we have time for Q&A. But the fiscal year, guys, just ended of 2022. Border Patrol actually released the numbers late last night on a Friday night because they didn't want anyone to know. But for folks who don't know, the fiscal year just ended. We had 2.3 million apprehensions at the border. 2.3 million apprehensions. That is not even counting the 900,000 gotaways are in the country. And as of right now, we have 250,000 unaccompanied minors have reached the border. Actually, Border Patrol, Texas law enforcement, not even Border Patrol, Texas law enforcement has already seized enough fentanyl to kill every single American inside the United States. So the numbers are staggering. So I just want to share a little bit of my perspective. I'll still be here, guys, after I speak. So if you guys want to come up and talk to me, I'll kind of share some of the things I see at the border. Do we still have time, Q&A? Yes, sir? We'll see. If you guys have any questions, I could take a question or two.
So we are going to do a Q&A, but I'll have you stand right over here to the right, okay? We're going to rearrange the furniture like the living room. We're about to swap into panel mode. So that'll be a good little distraction real quick. So who's got a question? All right, you, sir. So the Mexican government isn't charging them, but
the Mexican State Police has been charging migrants for basically human smuggling fees. The population that we see has been most vulnerable to all of this is the Venezuelan population. So the Venezuelan population, they've been extorted by Mexican police, assaulted. We actually it was about a month ago, we interviewed, and I think you shared the video, Rolando, where it was a Venezuelan woman who was actually sexually assaulted by Mexican police, and her daughter was sexually assaulted. Her daughter was 9 years old, and Mexican State Police made her take her clothes off and sexually assaulted her. So they're not charging them directly, but the Mexican police will still make money